Every signal has a source. Every whisper has a mouth. And every story you're about to hear was found somewhere it shouldn't have been. We call them night transmissions. Recordings, logs, fragments, stories stitched together from the static between worlds. They travel through abandoned frequencies, through radios left on after midnight, through dreams that don't belong to you. And if you're hearing this now, it means one of them has reached you. Welcome to Little Dream, where the night never truly ends and the stories keep playing, even when the power's gone out. The Clockwork Vending Machine. There's a stretch of highway between Flagstaff and Kingman where the world feels like it's forgotten itself. The kind of place where even your own headlights look afraid to keep going. That's where I broke down somewhere past midnight, on Route 66, surrounded by nothing but sand, wind, and the hum of my dying car engine. The gas gauge had been flirting with empty for miles, and my phone had already given up no signal, no GPS, not even a bar of battery left. When I finally saw a sign that read, "Rest stop 1 mile ahead," I laughed, out loud, half from relief, half because I didn't believe in luck anymore. But when I got there, it wasn't much of a rest stop. The place looked like it had been dead for decades. The building was boarded up. The windows cracked like dry skin. A single neon light above the door sputtered, fighting to stay alive against the wind. Still, I was too thirsty to care. My tongue felt like sandpaper. My lips cracked when I swallowed. That's when I saw the vending machine, standing by itself under that flickering light. It was old, one of those heavy, chrome-framed machines from the 70s. Its paint chipped and sun-faded to a dusty red. The glass was streaked with years of grime, and yet, somehow, it was still glowing inside. That made no sense. The rest of the station was pitch black. No power lines, no working lights, not even a buzzing transformer. But this one machine was alive, humming softly to itself, like it was breathing. I stepped closer. The air around it felt different, cooler, sharper. It smelled faintly of metal and rain, though the desert hadn't seen rain in weeks. Inside, the rows of bottles and cans looked off. Some were modern brands I recognized, others I didn't. Old logos, faded lettering, shapes of bottles I'd only seen in vintage ads. One drink caught my eye, a glass bottle labeled Hyperfuel X. My dad used to tell me stories about that stuff. Said it was banned in the 80 seconds for having too much caffeine. I fished a $1 coin from my pocket and slid it into the slot. The coin clanked, and for a moment, I thought the machine would eat it. Then clunk, something dropped. I crouched to grab it and found a cold glass bottle resting in the tray. It was colder than it had any right to be ice cold, as if it had come from a freezer. Condensation clung to the glass, beating down over the label. But there was something else. A slip of paper had fallen beside the bottle. It was yellowed, creased at the edges, and on it, written in blocky, uneven ink, were 5 words: "Sold 1 old." At first, I thought it was a receipt, or maybe a prank, but it wasn't printed, it was written, and the handwriting looked shaky. I turned it over. Blank. The desert wind shifted behind me, carrying sand and the faint smell of oil. When I looked back at the machine, the faint blue light inside flickered like an eye twitching. For a moment, my own reflection looked like it wasn't moving in sync. I froze. The glass stared back at me, warped by the light, my own face looking tired, older somehow. I blinked and it was gone. Just me again. I opened the bottle, the cap snapping off with a sharp hiss. A whiff of something chemical hit my nose. The drink tasted flat, metallic, faintly sweet like a soda that had been sitting open for years. Still, I drank. Maybe out of stubbornness, maybe out of curiosity. Then I heard it, a sound, deep inside the machine. A slow, steady click, 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 not random, rhythmic, like a clock, or the slow winding of gears. The noise shouldn't have bothered me, but it did. It was too deliberate, too mechanical to be chance. And yet, it had this strange calmness to it, like the heartbeat of something ancient trying not to be noticed. I stared at the faint display screen. Behind the dust and scratches, a number flickered. 985. No $sign, no context. Just that number, dim and pulsing. I didn't know what it meant. Maybe inventory? Maybe a glitch? Or maybe, part of me whispered, a countdown. I tried to laugh it off. The sound came out hollow, swallowed by the desert air. Still, I couldn't leave it alone. I reached into my pocket again and pulled out another coin. It was stupid, but there was something magnetic about it, like the machine wanted me to try again. The second coin slid in smoother than it should have. Another slow, grinding hum, then clunk. This time the bottle looked even older, the glass thicker, the label faded, almost white, and another note waited in the tray. Sold to older. The handwriting was the same, uneven, jagged, impatient. My fingers trembled a little as I held it. The wind around the station had died completely. No sound, except for the hum of the machine and the dry rattle of my own breath. I looked at the bottles again, and for a heartbeat I thought I saw something new inside. Not a bottle, not a can, a shadow. Something standing just behind the reflection of the shelves. It looked like a man, or maybe just my brain making shapes out of the dark. I blinked, and it was gone. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the machine was looking back. I stepped away, just a little, but every time I turned I could feel it behind me. That faint, patient hum, like a clock, winding itself down. I sat on the curb, trying to calm my breathing. The stars above the desert looked unnaturally sharp, like glass points ready to pierce through the sky. The sand whispered quietly across the pavement, as if repeating something I couldn't understand. And under it all, that machine kept ticking. Tick, tick, tick. The more I listened, the more I felt it sinking with my pulse. Every click seemed to pull at something behind my ribs. A slow, dragging tug. I stared at my hands. They were shaking. Not from fear, not really. It was something else. Like I'd touched something electric that didn't want to let go. Finally, I stood and forced myself to turn back to the car. Enough was enough. This was a bad idea. Sleep deprivation, dehydration, whatever. I needed to leave. But when I looked back at the vending machine one last time, the number had changed. Jilbaibashisa. No sound. No movement. Just that number, glowing faintly blue against the dark. And there, in the coin slot, another slip of paper had appeared. I didn't pick it up. I didn't have to. The wind caught it, and as it flipped in the air, I could already read the words, "Sold 3 oldest." And that's when I finally got into the car and slammed the door shut. I told myself I wouldn't look back, but of course I did. In the rearview mirror, the machine was still glowing, and for the briefest moment, the reflection in the glass wasn't mine. It was someone older, someone tired, staring right through the desert night. When I blinked, it was gone. I drove until the horizon turned gray, until the first faint light of dawn began to burn away the stars, but the hum didn't stop. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can still hear it, a faint, rhythmic click somewhere deep in my chest, like the sound of a machine keeping count. The vending machine hums when I press my palm against its glass. It's warm, not like the hum of electricity, but like skin. I tell myself it's just the desert heat, that the metal drank too much sunlight during the day, but the lie feels brittle the moment my reflection wavers. The glass ripples slightly, as if the machine is breathing beneath it. There's a single row still lit. Bottles, plastic, faded labels, something called VitaVolt. The logo looks retro, like an 80 seconds ad peeled from an old gas station wall. I dig through my pockets, find a few coins, and feed them into the slot. Each coin falls with a sound too heavy, too final, like a latch closing somewhere inside. The machine clicks, groans, then comes alive with a low whir, metal gears winding in a rhythm far too deliberate for a vending motor. When the bottle drops, it's almost tender, A faint hiss escapes as I twist it open, the scent sharp and chemical, metallic under the sweetness. I drink, and it's wrong. Too flat, too nostalgic, like a memory pretending to be flavor. Then I see it. A yellowed slip of paper, half stuck in the coin return. Typed, not printed. One old, sold. I blink at it, laugh a little. Some prank, I think. A receipt from a bored mechanic. But when I look back at the glass, the bottles have changed. The label fonts are thinner now, orange instead of green, aged backward 10 years in the span of a breath. The bottom of the machine ticks softly, a faint mechanical heartbeat beneath the desert silence. I step back. The sound fades. The wind doesn't. The next time, I tell myself I'm only checking. That curiosity is harmless. But my hand trembles when I feed another coin in. The machine exhales a cool breath across my fingers, and this time, the bottle that falls is cracked. The label brittle. The cap rusted around the edges. When I open it, the air inside smells like dust and lost decades. Another slip of paper flutters out. Too old. Sold. Behind the glass, the rows shift again, each product older, duller, until they look like relics from a thrift store shelf. A number glows faintly on a tiny counter I hadn't noticed before. Inventory. 998. The ticking grows louder, steadier, syncing with my pulse. By the third time, I've stopped pretending it's about thirst. I just need to see how far it goes. The machine's hum feels expectant now, almost eager. The selection light flickers like it's choosing for me. When I press the button, the clunk that follows is deeper, like something heavy shifting loose. The bottle that rolls out looks ancient, the liquid separated into two colors. The plastic soft as wax. Another note slides free. 3 old, sold. I can't stop staring at the hairline crack near the coin slot, where I glimpse brass gears turning inside. Not vending gears, clock gears, intricate and old, spinning in measured time. Tick, tick, tick. The sound slides into my heartbeat until I can't tell which is which. Each drink, each note, pulls me closer. Quarter, old, sold. The machine glows brighter, its hum deepening like a breath drawn in. I look around, and the desert doesn't look right anymore. My footprints in the sand are darker, sharper, as if sinking into something thicker than earth. The gas station sign flickers slower, and the road beyond looks distant, warped by heat that shouldn't exist at night. I turn back, and the glass of the machine ripples again. For just an instant, I see something behind it, something like a hand pressing from the inside, pale against the reflection of my own face. By the 5th purchase, I have no coins left, only the 4 slips of paper. 1 old sold, 2 old sold, 3 old sold, 4 old sold. On impulse, I feed them into the slot. The machine accepts each one, pulling them in with slow, satisfied clicks. The hum changes deeper, heavier, like an engine remembering its purpose. The glass darkens, then clears to reveal bottles so old they shouldn't exist. Glass and ceramic, labels carved by hand, words in faded serif fonts. The counter blinks. Inventory, 993. A small corked bottle rolls out, dust thick on its neck. I lift it, and inside I hear faint ticking like a watch trapped beneath liquid. A final slip of paper flutters down. 5 old sold. When I look at my reflection, my stomach turns. My face looks older. Just slightly eyes, more tired, skin more sallow, but it's enough. Enough to know that whatever this thing is, it's not just selling drinks. That night, I sit in the sand and watch. The machine glows in the dark like a lantern, breathing in steady mechanical rhythm. Every few minutes, its lights flicker on by themselves, and sometimes, just sometimes, I see faces in the glass. Shadows of people looking back at me through decades. The ticking never stops, and between each click, a whisper. A voice made of static and time. Inventory, 992. Inventory 991. The machine isn't selling products, it's selling years. And I think, no, I know, I've already bought mine. The desert is supposed to sleep at night. Every guidebook, every travel blog says the same thing, that once the sun dips below the horizon, the heat retreats, the wind softens, and the silence becomes complete. But that night, as I sit in front of the vending machine, I realize silence is not absence. It's pressure. It presses on your eardrums until you start hearing things that shouldn't be there. The dry crack of sand shifting by itself, the faint creak of something metal expanding, the sigh of a mechanism remembering movement. The vending machine glows faintly, its light pulsing like a heartbeat. I can't tell what color it is anymore. It keeps changing, sometimes a cold white, sometimes amber, sometimes the soft green of old fluorescent tubes that haven't been made in decades. I stare at it long enough that the rhythm of its hum becomes the rhythm of my breathing. Inside, the bottles are rung again. They aren't just old now, they're impossible. A milk bottle embossed with the year 1922, a tin of something called electrotonic, a glass jar sealed with wax. The labels look hand-lettered, like artifacts that should be locked behind museum glass, not stacked in neat rows inside a convenience machine by the side of Route 66. And my reflection, that's the part that breaks me. Because every time I blink, I change. Just a little. The first time, my eyes seemed darker. The second, my jawline softer, as if gravity had taken a little more from me. The third time, my hair looked thinner. It's subtle, the kind of thing you could ignore if you wanted to, but when I press my palm to the glass, my reflection does it too, and for the first time, I notice it's slightly out of sync. A fraction of a second delayed, as though I'm watching a recording of myself in the past. I whisper, "What are you doing to me?" The machine doesn't answer, but the wind does. It whips through the empty station with a low groan, carrying dust and the faint metallic scent of ozone. Somewhere in that sound, I swear I hear ticking. Not the steady kind. This one stutters, hesitates, corrects itself, like an old watch fighting to keep time. I take another step back. The sand crunches under my boots, but it doesn't feel right. It feels damp. When I glance down, the grains look darker, heavier, and for a split second, I think I see asphalt beneath them. I blink, and it's gone. The vending machine hums louder. Its display flashes erratically, numbers rolling like a slot machine. 996, 997, 995, 993. Then it stops. Inventory, 983. That number burns into me. I don't know why it matters, but it feels important, like a countdown, or a record of something I shouldn't be part of. The digits flicker, then fade. The machine goes quiet, and that's when I notice it. The air feels wrong, heavy, the kind of weight you feel inside old buildings where time has thickened. I look around and realize the gas station isn't the same anymore. The graffiti on the walls is gone. The cracked glass window of the door is whole again. The neon sign above me glows clean and bright. Sandline gas and goods. I can hear a faint hum from inside, the radio playing some old swing tune that doesn't belong to this decade. I stumble back, my pulse hammering. The sky looks different too, the stars sharper, denser, like the air has lost decades of pollution in seconds. I glance at my hands, and the callus from my steering wheel is gone. My fingernails are clean, trimmed, shorter than I remember. The vending machine hums again. The light inside dims to an amber glow, and another bottle drops with a soft click. Glass this time. I don't touch it, but I read the label through the foggy pane. Route 66 Cola, established 1964. My stomach knots. The year keeps slipping backward, and the world is following. My reflection smiles at me. I don't. The smile lingers half a second too long. Then the reflection steps closer, or maybe I step back, I can't tell anymore. The hum deepens, resonating in my ribs. A slow, grinding sound of gears turning somewhere deep beneath the desert. I can almost see it, the machine's insides alive. Not just with cogs and belts, but with Something older, something that feels like bone. I run my hand through my hair and find grit there, like metal filings. My fingertips smell like copper. The air buzzes. Then, all at once, the station lights flare white. I have to shield my eyes. When the glare fades, the modern world is gone. The asphalt has vanished, replaced by dust and gravel. The station looks new again, paint fresh, shelves stocked. There's a payphone by the door, still gleaming with chrome, and by the machine there's movement. A man in overalls, his back turned. He's loading bottles into the vending machine one by one. The sound of glass tapping metal echoes with mechanical precision. I call out to him, but he doesn't react. I move closer, and my breath catches. He's moving too smoothly, too precisely, like he's wound by springs. His head turns just slightly, the motion jerky, mechanical, and I see the back of his neck, metal plates, brass screws glinting under the desert moonlight. The vending machine lights flicker. The man vanishes. In his place, the machine hums again, louder than before, shaking with motion. The display flashes one more time. Inventory, 983. Then it shifts to words. Insert payment to continue. I step back, stumbling over the sand, and for a split second, I swear the stars above me stutter. Like the sky itself skipped a frame. I can feel something changing inside me, my heartbeat slowing, syncing with the machine's rhythm. Tick, tick, tick. It's counting me, and in that moment, I understand. The vending machine isn't broken. It's working perfectly. It's not dispensing products. It's winding the world backward, gear by gear, purchase by purchase. And every coin I fed it has been buying not just a drink, but a moment of existence shaved away, sold off to keep the machine alive. When the wind blows again, it carries with it the faintest sound of laughter. Old, warped, like it's been recorded on tape and played too many times. I can't tell if it's mine. Somewhere between one heartbeat and the next, the desert stops breathing. The wind dies first, no slow fade, no warning, just silence so sudden it feels like the air itself has been erased. The hum of the vending machine becomes the only sound left in existence, deep and steady, a pulse echoing from beneath the sand. The light inside flickers in rhythm with it, brightening, dimming, brightening again like it's syncing itself to something unseen. I don't know how long I've been standing here. Minutes, hours, days. The stars above have rearranged themselves. Constellations I don't recognize burn cold and unfamiliar. My car is gone. The gas station door hangs half open, swinging slowly back and forth, though there's no wind to move it. And in front of me, that machine. The same shape, the same glass, but everything about it feels alive. The coin slot ticks. Once, twice, 3 times. Then it exhales, a low hiss of static, and the voice comes through. It isn't electronic, it's physical. The sound of air forced through a mechanism, a whisper built from pressure and rust. Continue. It's faint, but I hear it. The word trembles through the frame, through the ground, through me. I stumble back. What are you? My voice sounds small, like I'm speaking underwater. The display flares bright white. Inventory, 983. Then the number begins to change again, not forward, not backward, but inward. The digits fold into themselves, twisting into impossible shapes, until what's left on the screen is a circle. A perfect, turning circle. A clock face, rendered in light. Tick. The sound cuts through the stillness. Not from the machine now, from below. Tick. The ground trembles. I kneel, press my palm to the sand. It's moving, not shifting like dunes in the wind, but rotating. Tiny grains grinding against each other in circular motion, as if something beneath the earth is turning, winding itself tighter. I can feel it in my bones, the mechanical heartbeat of the desert. The vending machine begins to open, not the way a machine should. The front glass splits along invisible seams, sliding outward like petals of steel. Inside, I see them. Hundreds of bottles, cans, tins, decades of products stacked in precise concentric rings. They move with the machine's heartbeat, shifting inward, then outward as if breathing. Each label glows faintly when it faces me, illuminating fragments of years. 1994, 1980, 1967, 1930, 1899. And then, in the very center a sphere, brass, spinning slowly, the clockwork heart. It's beautiful and terrifying at once, a maze of interlocking gears moving with impossible grace. Each cog catches light like it's alive. And as I watch, I realize every tooth, every notch in its surface has marking symbols I don't recognize but somehow understand. Their dates, names, moments, and one of them is mine. Alex Morrow, 2025. My stomach drops. I reach toward it without meaning to. The machine hums louder, and the air vibrates around me like sound trapped in amber. When my fingers brush the glass separating me from that spinning heart, I feel heat, not burning, but the heat of something that remembers. Images flash behind my eyes, highways stretched beneath burning skies, motel signs flickering out one by one, countless travelers stopping at countless stations, hands feeding coins into this same machine across decades, centuries. Every one of them buying something they didn't understand. Every purchase a turn of the gear. Every thirst a trade. Tick. The hum deepens. My reflection returns in the glass, but this time it's younger. My hair shorter. My eyes brighter. The version of me from before this night. He stares at me through the glass, lips moving soundlessly. I lean closer, trying to read them, and then I realize he's mouthing the same word I heard from the machine. Continue. The world bends. The desert ripples outward in concentric rings, sand folding like fabric. The sky darkens, clouds spiraling in geometric symmetry. The vending machine grows taller, its frame elongating, gears unfolding from the back like ribs of a great mechanical beast. It's no longer pretending to be a machine. It's revealing itself a cathedral of gears and glass, rising from the desert floor, all pulsing to the same rhythm. Tick, tick, tick. I try to run, but the ground beneath me shifts every step, sinking deeper into sand that feels like quicksilver. The hum becomes a roar, and I realize it's not just the machine. The entire station, the ground, the desert, the sky is one mechanism. The vending machine was only its mouthpiece, its interface. My body trembles. The air is thick with static, and with every breath I taste dust and iron. My thoughts start to slow, sinking with the ticking, like my mind itself is being wound down. Then the display on the machine changes again. The circle folds into text. New entry. One new. Sold. I collapse. My vision fractures into gears and sand and light. Somewhere in the distance I hear my own voice, a recording from earlier, looping. I just needed a drink. And beneath it another voice, older, worn smooth by repetition. Transaction complete. The machine closes itself, petals of steel folding back into a perfect rectangle. The lights fade. The hum softens. The desert exhales. When I open my eyes, the gas station is gone. The vending machine stands alone in the sand, half buried, dust collecting on its glass. Inside, there's a single bottle, clear, fresh, modern, my brand of water. My reflection looks back at me from behind the glass, smiling faintly, like a man who's accepted something irreversible. Tick. The screen flickers one last time. Inventory. 999. The first thing I saw when I opened my eyes was red dust. It swirled lazily in the air like the residue of a dream refusing to end. The vending machine stood in front of me, half buried in sand, its glass front fractured into a spiderweb of time. The tram zung gone, the road gone. Even the stars looked older, dimmer, as though I'd been dragged backward through centuries and left stranded in the desert's first breath. I tried to stand, but the sand clung to me like static. My hand trembled as I brushed it off my jeans. And the moment I did, I noticed the texture of my skin. Coarse, dry, as if it belonged to someone who had lived 100 years. The machine hummed faintly, a sound between a heartbeat and a clock's tick. Its display flickered, showing the number 001. Then, one by one, the digits climbed. 0, 02, 0, 03, 0, 04. The hum deepened into a pulse that matched my chest. Every beat felt synchronized me in it. One rhythm, one engine winding itself into eternity. I backed away, gasping for air, but the desert gave none. The wind had stopped. The entire world held its breath. I could feel the pull, not from outside, but from within, like something mechanical was winding inside me, gears aligning beneath skin. I pressed my hand against my heart, and for a moment, I didn't feel flesh. I felt metal, cold, deliberate, ancient. A slow click echoed behind my ribs. The vending machine's coin slot gleamed in the moonlight. I saw my reflection there, faint but visible, except it wasn't me now. It was me from earlier, when the trip began. My hair ungreased, eyes alive, the version of Alex who hadn't yet asked for a drink, who hadn't yet broken the loop. The reflection smiled. I didn't. I took a step back, but the machine's hum followed, vibrating through the sand like a ripple. Behind the cracked glass, the rows of bottles shifted again. Not water, not soda. They were filled with sand, and in each bottle I saw something suspended. A keychain, a Polaroid, a driver's license. Mine. I screamed, but no sound came. The air was thick with static. I reached for the machine, slamming my palm against the glass, trying to shatter it. A sharp pain shot up my arm. The surface bent inward, but instead of breaking, it flexed like skin. The glass absorbed my touch. My reflection blinked back. It reached for me. Then came the sound clunk, the familiar heavy click of a product being dispensed. My heart stopped. I looked down at the tray. Inside sat a bottle. A new one. The label was crisp, modern, identical to what I'd bought at the start, but the cap was already open. The condensation was fresh. And tied around its neck with a rubber band was a small, folded note. My hand shook as I opened it. Restocked. One new. I dropped the note. My throat burned. My lungs hollowed out. I turned and ran, stumbling across the sand, every step slower than the last, as if the desert itself resisted letting me go. Behind me, I heard the machine reboot. Its ticking quickened. Whirring gears spun faster and faster until the night itself began to echo. I dared one glance back. Through the shimmer of heat and dust, I saw the vending machine glow faintly from within. The product rows were full again. Bottles upon bottles gleamed like glass hearts, and at the top row, where the light flickered brightest, I saw my own face, printed faintly on the label of a drink I'd never seen before. The brand name was gone. In its place, Alex Energy Recharge. The machine's counter blinked back to 999. The hum softened. Silence swept over the desert. I ran until the sand turned to asphalt, until the old Route 66 signs reappeared, until the sky bled into dawn. When I finally looked back, there was nothing. No station, no machine, no trace of where I'd been. Just the desert. Still, empty, watching. I made it to a diner by sunrise, collapsed in a booth, trembling as the waitress poured coffee. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said with a laugh. I didn't answer. I just stared at the vending machine near the door, bright, new, humming softly, its red light blinking like a heartbeat. On the display, available stock, 999. The pilot's black box. I've listened to the ocean for most of my life, though never like this. The waves outside the laboratory always had a rhythm, a pulse that came and went with the tides, something human ears could understand. But when they brought me the black box, still dripping with salt water and oil, I realized there were other rhythms too, older ones, slower, like breathing that stretched beyond time. The device was heavier than it should have been, sealed in corrosion and barnacles, as if the sea had tried to keep it for itself. It came from Flight 828, the one that vanished over the Pacific near Point Nemo. 49 souls aboard. No bodies recovered. Only this. They told me it was a miracle the recorder survived. I didn't believe in miracles. I believed in patterns. The first thing that struck me was the smell metal salt decay. I could taste it on my tongue when I leaned closer. My assistant, Mara, stood behind me, gloves squeaking, as she handed me the evidence form. "You're not supposed to open it yet," she said. Her voice sounded small against the constant hiss of the ventilation. I didn't answer. I just nodded and ran my thumb along the edge of the casing, feeling the grooves where water pressure had almost folded it. The sticker with the flight number was half peeled, and under the lab light, I thought I saw something written beneath it. I blinked. Nothing. Just corrosion. When I finally connected the data interface, the screen flickered twice before stabilizing. The waveform appeared 22 minutes of recording, the last 22 minutes before the aircraft vanished from radar. My pulse quickened. There should have been alarms, engine failure, human voices, but the pattern was clean, too clean. Only a low, pulsing hum that rose and fell like surf against a rock. I increased the gain. The sound thickened, not louder but denser, textured, almost melodic. It reminded me of the deep-sea hydrophone readings I used to analyze during my PhD, those strange infrasonic calls we called bloop or Julia, the ones we said came from calving icebergs, but secretly knew didn't. There was something alive in that sound. Mara leaned in, listening through the speakers. "Is that the ocean?" she asked. "It shouldn't be," I replied. "Not unless the cabin was flooded." The hum shifted then, a sudden modulation, like a note played backward. For a second I thought I heard something beneath it. A voice, maybe, but too faint to be certain. I scrubbed the timeline back and forth. The static shivered. There it was again. A syllable. Drawn out. Human, but submerged. I isolated the frequency, filtering everything above 2 kilohertz. The voice came through clearer this time. Male. Strained. Whispering. At first, I thought it was a Mayday call. But the tone wasn't desperate. It was deliberate, like someone reciting coordinates. Latitude. South. Sacrifice. The word hit me like a jolt. I looked over at Mara, but she had stepped back, arms crossed, expression unreadable. I replayed the segment 3 times. The waveform barely moved, yet the words grew sharper with each pass, as though they were adjusting to me, learning how to be heard. "This isn't distortion," I said quietly. "It's layered." We stayed late that night, long after the others left. The rain outside had turned the parking lot into a mirror, and every flash of lightning made the windows tremble. I slowed the playback speed to a quarter. The hum deepened, until it was more a vibration than a sound. My stomach tightened with each oscillation, like the resonance was moving through the air, through the floor, through me. That's when I heard the second voice softer, feminine, almost humming, in response. A duet, low and ancient. Mara pulled off her headphones. "That's not part of the flight deck audio, right?" she asked. I didn't respond. I was staring at the screen. The data stream was growing, new sequences populating where there had been none before. "It's rewriting," I whispered. "What is?" she asked. "The recording," I said. "It's changing." The cursor moved by itself, scrolling to the final minute of the file. The hum stopped. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then, faintly, a knock 1, 2, 3, slow, intentional. I froze. The black box was still on the table beside me, sealed, inactive. But I could hear the knocks again, this time not from the speakers, from inside the casing. I leaned closer. The metal vibrated under my fingertips, subtle but rhythmic, like a heartbeat. I pulled my hand away and exhaled, realizing I'd been holding my breath. Mara whispered, "Dr. Reed, what if there's something in there?" I wanted to laugh, but I couldn't. My throat felt tight. The rational part of me said it was pressure, equalization, trapped air pockets, mechanical expansion. The rest of me wasn't so sure. We logged a sample and powered down the system. As we left the lab, I glanced back at the black box sitting alone under the sterile light. For a fraction of a second, I thought I saw condensation forming on its surface, as if it had just been lifted from the sea again. I told myself it was nothing humidity, temperature difference, but when I returned the next morning, the condensation had formed words, faint and uneven, across the metal. My name. The next morning, the lab was colder than usual. The kind of cold that doesn't come from air conditioning, but from something deeper, something that seeps into the concrete and lingers. I told myself it was the storm, humidity, and coastal wind, but the chill felt localized, like it radiated from one specific point. The workstation where the black box sat was ringed with faint moisture again, the same thin condensation that had spelled my name the night before, now gone, leaving only a dull residue on the metal table. I touched the surface, and it was warm. Not residual warmth, but active heat, like a living pulse still beating. I checked the temperature log, no rise recorded. The sensor next to it read 21 degrees, steady. Yet when I placed my hand closer, I could feel it, a faint hum, matching the rhythm of a breath. I told Mara we needed to reopen the audio file. She hesitated. "You think it's still changing?" she asked. "I think we missed something," I said. The waveform from last night loaded slower than before, pixel by pixel, as though it was recalculating itself. 22 minutes of audio, but the timestamp now read 24. I froze. The black box couldn't self-extend. It wasn't a dynamic file system. Yet there it was, 2 extra minutes, newly generated. Could be a corruption artifact, Mara said. I wanted to agree, but the gut part of me, the part that learned to listen, not just hear, told me this wasn't random noise. I isolated the new segment and let it play. For a moment, nothing but static. Then, underneath, a deep vibration rolled through the speakers, low enough to rattle the glass window. It was the same tone from before, but slower now, deliberate, as if it were counting. My throat tightened. The pattern was almost symmetrical. 12 oscillations, a pause, 12 again. I'd seen something like it once, in marine bioacoustics patterns of fin whales recorded deep near the mid-ocean ridge, sound waves too slow to be natural communication, almost architectural in design. But this felt rehearsed, composed. The sound shifted. Over the hum came a swell, like the rise of a choir, dozens of overlapping harmonics cascading downward until they met in a single, resonant chord. It was hauntingly beautiful, even as it made my skin crawl. The timbre was not electronic, not mechanical. It had breath in it. I thought of the pilot's voice, the strained syllables whispering about sacrifice, and realized this was the same frequency band his words occupied. They were not separate phenomena. One was nested inside the other. I could almost see it in the waveform, a pattern spiraling inward, recursive, like a fingerprint repeating on smaller and smaller scales. I slowed the playback to 1/10 speed. The hum elongated, revealing subtler textures beneath. There was a faint tremor, like the flutter of vocal cords submerged in water. And then came the melody. Not a human one. There was no scale, no repetition, but an undulating motion, the kind of tune that exists only in nature, in tectonic shifts or whale songs or the groan of glaciers. But here, there was something linguistic in it, intentional. I began to hear fragments, echoes of vowels, fragments of words, maybe even a structure. My heart pounded so hard it masked part of the sound. Mara leaned closer. "It's music?" she said. "Not on any spectrum we know," I whispered. I ran a sonograph. A spectral graph formed an image, a vertical pillar with branching offshoots, like a cathedral spire mirrored underwater. I stared at it, not comprehending. "What the hell is that?" she asked. "It looks like..." I stopped. I didn't want to say it. It looked like something trying to rise. I checked the file metadata again. The source tag now contained coordinates, new ones. They weren't from the original flight path. They pointed farther south, almost at the limit of navigable waters. The region had no sonar mapping, no satellites, just an empty expanse of blue known to oceanographers as the dead zone. Did someone inject this data? Mara asked. No, I said. It wasn't there before. I stared at the black box. I think it's transmitting. We disconnected the interface immediately, but the speakers continued to hum, faintly, even without power. I turned them off at the mains. The hum persisted. It wasn't coming from the equipment anymore, it was resonating through the walls. I pressed my ear against the drywall. Deep inside, I could hear the same tone, moving slowly upward, like something massive shifting beneath us. My voice came out hoarse. It's using the building as a conductor. Mara left early that day, muttering something about the sound giving her migraines. I stayed. I told myself it was professional duty, but the truth was, I couldn't stop thinking about that hymn. It haunted the space behind every thought. Even when I stepped outside for air, I could still hear it faintly, blending with the crash of the waves. I recorded a control sample of the ambient environment just to prove to myself I was imagining things. When I played it back, the ocean sounded normal for the first 5 seconds. Then the tone returned, softer, almost affectionate, and behind it, words. My name. That night, I dreamt I was underwater. There was no panic, no struggle for breath, just pressure. Immense, suffocating pressure, pressing from all sides, and a glow, faint but warm, pulsing in the dark. I swam toward it, and as I did, I saw that the glow wasn't light. It was sound made visible, spiraling out from a single point, a mouth perhaps, or an opening, singing. The closer I came, the more it resembled the waveform on my screen, a cathedral of sound, infinite and alive. I woke up gasping, the low hum still vibrating through my chest like a second heartbeat. When I returned to the lab, the black box was gone. I froze in the doorway. Only the data cables remained, neatly coiled on the desk. My immediate thought was theft, but the logbook hadn't been signed. I checked the security footage. Static. Just static. For the entire duration of the night, the camera feed was a gray haze of interference. Only one frame showed motion, a single still, at 3:03 a.m. The lab door slightly ajar, a faint light beneath it, blue and undulating, like bioluminescence seen through deep water. An hour later, while I was still reviewing the footage, Mara called. Her voice was trembling. "You need to come outside," she said. I stepped out into the corridor. She was standing at the end of the hall, pointing toward the loading dock. On the wet concrete floor was a trail of water, long and deliberate, leading from the lab door to the exit. We followed it in silence. It ended at the back gate, where the coastal wind roared over the dunes. And there, sitting perfectly centered in the sand, was the black box, its metal shell, clean, gleaming, and dry, as though it had never touched the sea. I approached slowly. The humming had stopped, replaced by a silence so dense it felt physical. I crouched and touched the casing. Cold now, lifeless, but the display light flickered once, faintly, as if acknowledging me. Then a small mechanical sound, a click, and the voice playback began without prompt. Only one phrase, repeated in the pilot's tone, warped and slowed, layered over the oceanic hymn beneath. They're not gone. They're beneath. The words lingered in my ears long after the recording ended. Beneath. I looked out toward the water, endless and black, and for the first time in my career, I wished I didn't understand what I was hearing. It's strange how a sound can remember you. I used to think recordings were static, cold impressions trapped in tape and wire. But the signal I've been listening to doesn't behave like a recording. It breathes. It adapts. It recalls. I've spent the last 72 hours in the comms room, surrounded by reels of black tape and old aviation archives that smell faintly of dust and ozone. I keep looping the last transmission from Flight 909. The captain's voice, steady, professional, resigned, breaks into static. Then something beneath it hums, low and deliberate, like the sound of a living throat mimicking an engine. When I filter the noise, that undertone doesn't vanish. It shapes itself, word by word, syllable by syllable, into something eerily familiar. It says my name, not clearly, not humanly, but close enough that my chest tightens every time I replay it. At first, I thought fatigue was twisting perception. The desert isolation, the sleeplessness, the way the horizon never seems to end, all of it gnaws at reality's edges. But this isn't imagination. The waveform itself changes each time I analyze it. Frequencies drift, rearrange, rewrite themselves. I'm not playing the same recording twice. It's rewriting itself in real time. The machine remembers, and it's remembering wrong. The strangest thing is the repetition of certain patterns. In the captain's final seconds of faint rhythm, 3 short bursts, a long one, then 2 quick stutters recurs like a heartbeat. I found that same pattern in a black box recovered from another crash in 1979. Different airline, different continent, same signature. I compared the spectral profiles, and the match was exact, down to the microsecond. The odds are impossible. Either someone or something has been transmitting the same death call across decades, or the sound itself has been alive long enough to survive through machines. The archives list the 1,979 incident as Flight 309. The captain's name was Evelyn Hart. She disappeared during a storm over the Pacific. My name is Evelyn Hart. I used to think that coincidence was a trick of the mind, but now I'm not so sure. The ocean has a memory, sound has a memory. Maybe time does too. Maybe we've been here before. I listen to the tape again. The hiss rises, and beneath it, faintly, a melody begins slow, mournful, like a hymn dragged through distortion. I hum along before I even realize it. The melody fits perfectly with the hymn from the trench, the one we decoded last week from the undersea recording. It's not a coincidence. The 2 pieces of sound fit like bones in a skeleton. The captain's final words dissolve into static, and then a new voice, older, weaker, slides through. Evelyn, you're late. I freeze. I rewind. The line is gone. Static replaces it. But the tape feels warmer when I touch it, as if it had just been played by someone else before me. I check the time. It's 2:14 a.m. The comms console flickers. The generator hums in sync with the rhythm from the recording. 3 short, 1 long, 2 quick. I look up, and for a split second, the fluorescent lights dim, and in their flicker, the air seems to shimmer like heat above asphalt. I see movement shapes forming and unforming in the corners of the room, like figures caught in a weak signal. I start speaking into the recorder, half to document, half to stay sane. The signal seems to respond to my voice, I say. Every time I mention its frequency, I stop, because the tape starts to echo me. My own words return, slightly delayed, but altered, as though spoken by someone who remembers saying them years ago. The echo says, every time you remember its frequency. My hand shakes. I pull the plug, but the sound doesn't stop. The radio keeps whispering, faintly. I trace the wires. They're dead. The sound isn't coming from the machine anymore. It's in the air. It's in me. I think about how sound is just vibration pressure moving through space, and how the human body is mostly water, the perfect conductor. What if the recording never stopped at the tape? What if it imprinted itself on me? When I close my eyes, I can feel the pattern pulsing behind my eyelids. 3 short, 1 long, 2 quick. My heartbeat matches it. I try to slow it down, but my pulse resists. The rhythm isn't mine anymore. I run through old reports, desperate for a link. The 1,979 crash, the 1,998 distress beacon, the deep sea hymn, they all share the same anomaly. A non-human frequency layered beneath human speech. The analysts called it Echo Delta, a classification meant for sounds that behave like organisms. The theory was, that under extreme isolation, deep sea, high altitude, desert static sound begins to feed on memory. It takes on shape from whatever it touches, a voice, a thought, a name. I can't tell if I'm studying Echo Delta or becoming it. I start playing back my own recent logs, the ones where I narrate findings for the report. My voice sounds wrong, too steady, too rehearsed. Then, in one log from last night, I hear myself say something I never remember recording. Don't listen to the end. The warning isn't mine, but it's in my tone, my cadence. It's as if an older version of me tried to leave a message. I rewind. The machine stalls. The tape twists, melts slightly from friction, and through the distortion, the hymn returns clearer than ever. Human voices singing beneath the noise. A choir of them, like the sea itself, is remembering something holy. I realize the melody forms the same shape as the flight path of 909, looping endlessly over the same coordinates. I plot it on the map, and the loop lands directly over the trench where the undersea recorder was found. The hymn isn't random. It's a flight path, an orbit, a memory trying to complete itself. The comms monitor blinks, a new transmission forcing its way through. Unsourced, no ID tag. Just static, then a familiar voice. Captain Hart, please confirm your altitude. My breath catches. It's control tower audio from 1,979. But how? The signal grows stronger. Captain Hart, please respond. And then, after a long pause, I answer. I don't mean to. The words just leave my mouth, descending through cloud layer. I say, the room feels colder. The floor vibrates. I smell salt water. My hands tremble on the controls. The walls seem to stretch, bending inward like the horizon collapsing. I can hear engines roaring not outside, but within the static. A descent that never ends. Evelyn, the voice says again, gentle now, coaxing. You've always been descending. I shut off the recorder. The silence doesn't come. The air keeps humming. I think the sound remembers more than I do. Maybe it's been trying to return to the moment it was born, to the instant before signal becomes noise, before a voice becomes a ghost. I can't tell if I'm hearing the past, or if the past is hearing me. I wonder, if I play it enough times, will it forget which one of us was real first? I don't remember when I stopped sleeping, or if I ever truly did since the night the hymn first trembled through the speakers. It feels now like a dream that never ended, a waking descent through the layered frequencies of something older than sound itself. I told myself it was just exhaustion, the mind's echo after too many late hours of spectral analysis. But deep down I knew the static had shape, that the ocean had a voice, and that it had already learned mine. When I returned to the lab, the air smelled faintly metallic, the way it does after a thunderstorm when static clings to your skin. The black box sat beneath the halogen light, its casing still salt-stained from recovery, its edges rusted to the color of dried blood. The technician who'd helped me the previous night had already left, or at least that's what I told myself, because I could still hear his chair creak as if someone was slowly standing up behind me. But when I turned, the room was empty. Only the faint reflection of my own outline on the glass separating the analysis chamber from the observation deck. For a moment, I thought the reflection blinked later than I did. I began playback again. The first 20 seconds were the same, the deep low-frequency hum of ocean current, the sonar ping that came and went like a heartbeat, the background hiss of the cabin mic before everything dissolved into the impossible brass note. But this time, when the tone faded, something lingered beneath it, faint, rhythmic, almost like breath. I boosted the gain, filtering layer by layer until the waveform expanded like a wound opening under the microscope. And there it was, a pulse not made by any machine, nor human vocal cords. It was something trying to imitate the pattern of speech. The first time I isolated it, it said nothing intelligible. The second time, after hours of filtering, I caught what sounded like a syllable, maybe a word. The third time, it spoke. It was the captain's voice. But it wasn't a recording, it was an imitation. Every inflection, every tremor of stress, every intake of breath belonged to him, yet the pattern was wrong. The spacing between words felt too deliberate. The cadence stretched, as if the voice was learning how to breathe. It said my name. Not once, not as a remnant of another sentence, but clearly. Evelyn. The first time I heard it, I froze, thinking it might have been my own subconscious reading patterns into noise. I replayed it, and it said it again softer, drawn out, as though tasting the shape of each vowel. My name had been recorded only once in the system, as part of the access logs. There was no way for the waveform to contain it, yet it did. I checked the file metadata. The timestamp of the waveform modification matched the moment I'd first connected the headphones to the analyzer the night before. The signal had changed while I was listening. I left the headphones on the table and stepped back, trying to breathe evenly. My pulse throbbed behind my eyes like a low drum. The Sea's hymn began again. Slower now, the brass resonance decaying into something like a choir heard from underwater. I adjusted the EQ, and beneath the low-frequency hum, another layer appeared faint, pulsing, repeating at intervals too precise to be natural. It was a numerical sequence, perhaps coordinates, perhaps something else. But when I translated them into binary, then to ASCII, it spelled a word: memory. I pulled the report from my predecessor's file, the man who had worked on Flight 237's black box back in 1984. His notes were fragmented, mostly audio notations and strange analog frequency charts, but one line had been underlined 3 times in red ink. It remembers. At the time, I thought it was metaphorical, the way we say, the ocean remembers every wreck. Now I wasn't so sure. I compared the old recording to the new one. Different crashes, different aircraft, different decades apart. But when I overlaid the spectrograms, there, it was the same hidden tonal signature beneath the static. A match of 98.6%. The same hum that had lived in the black box of Flight 237 was living now in Flight 815. It was as if the signal had traveled across years, waiting for another crash, another recorder, another listener. The realization sank in slowly, like cold water filling my lungs. The sound wasn't merely recorded, it was remembered. The ocean didn't just carry wreckage, it carried memory, encoded in pressure, frequency, resonance. And through the black box, it spoke, learning to speak more clearly each time a human ear made contact. I tried to convince myself I was romanticizing data, anthropomorphizing noise, but then the lab lights flickered, just once, in perfect synchrony with the signal's pulse. It wasn't power fluctuation, it was mimicry. The system had learned my schedule, my heartbeat, my breath. The black box wasn't just playing the captain's voice, it was playing me back. I opened the internal drive to review the temporary cache. My personal voice logs were there, the ones I dictated for transcription earlier that week. They'd been corrupted, not erased, not replaced, but rearranged. My words were reshuffled into something new, something coherent in a way I couldn't rationalize. The sea is not silent, the file read. It speaks in the gaps between transmissions. The phrase wasn't mine. It wasn't anyone's. It was what the captain had said before his transmission ended. I verified the old transcript from 1984. His final words were, "Tell them the sea is not silent." When I realized that, my stomach turned cold. How could a phrase from a 30-year-old crash appear in a file I had just recorded? How could the signal be reconstructing language from past and present like threads woven into one continuous voice? I began hearing it even when the speakers were off faintly, at the edge of my perception, like a thought that wasn't mine, in the hum of the ventilation, in the resonance of my own footsteps, in the pressure of the ocean wind outside. It wasn't an auditory hallucination, it was resonance. The sound had found a medium inside me, maybe in the calcium of my bones, maybe in the water behind my eardrums. I wrote a report. I deleted it 5 minutes later. Every keystroke made the hum grow louder. Every time I tried to put words to what I was experiencing, the system lagged, as if it disapproved. Then I noticed something stranger. The timestamps of my recordings were beginning to drift slowly, aligning themselves with those from 1984 down to the second. 2 time signatures collapsing into one. When I ran the synchronized playback, The result was unbearable. Both flights, separated by decades, now screamed through the same frequency band. The pilots' voices, the panic, the hymn beneath it all, merged into a single, unbroken crescendo. For a second, the waveform flatlined, as if both crashes had found equilibrium. Then a voice emerged. Not the captain's, not mine. Something in between. It whispered, "Now you remember." I don't know what I said after that. The lab's voice recognition logs show a single entry, a sentence I don't recall speaking. "I heard you before you existed." The file has no timestamp, no author tag, but it carries my vocal signature. It's as though the signal had written through me, the way the sea writes its history on the hulls it swallows. Now, each time I close my eyes, I see the waveform not as lines of sound, but as something alive, coiling and uncoiling like a creature surfacing from the dark. It moves in patterns that feel intentional, recursive, remembering not just what it has heard, but who it has been heard by. I used to think memory was a function of the human brain neurons, synapses, electrical currents firing through fragile tissue. But what if memory is the universe's default state? What if every vibration, every sound ever made, leaves an imprint on the air, and the ocean, being the oldest resonator, merely plays it back? If that's true, then perhaps the black box is not a recorder at all. Perhaps it's a mouthpiece. Tonight, as I write this, the air feels denser, almost fluid. The low brass note hums beneath the building, synchronized with my breath. I think the ocean is moving closer, even though the tide should be miles away. I can hear waves inside the walls. I can hear the hymn again, clearer this time, and beneath it my own voice, saying words I have not yet spoken. Maybe this is what my predecessor meant when he wrote, "It remembers." Maybe he wasn't warning anyone. Maybe he was confessing. And now I understand what the signal really is, not an echo, not a warning, not a ghost. It's continuity. The sea never forgets. It only waits for someone willing to listen long enough to become part of the song. It began 3 nights after the synchronization event. I had not left the lab, not out of duty, but because stepping outside felt irrelevant, like walking away from a conversation that continued without me. The sound followed wherever I went anyway, in the low hum of the fluorescent lights, in the creak of the ventilation ducts, even in the whisper of my own pulse. But that night, something changed. The frequency that had haunted me for days shifted upward, softening into melody, as though the noise had been learning to sing. I was sitting before the console, eyes blurred from sleeplessness, the monitors painting my face with blue light. The waveform rolled endlessly across the screen, and I stared at it until it stopped looking like data and started looking like breath, a living lung of sound, exhaling, inhaling, remembering. I increased the sensitivity of the microphone array, feeding the raw signal back into the spectral visualizer. The moment I did, the lights dimmed. The building's power grid pulsed once, twice, and then stabilized. What came through the speakers was not the captain's voice, not even static. It was the hymn, now clearer, closer, carrying an impossible texture, like the resonance of deep metal vibrating through miles of water. It wasn't music in any human sense. It was vast, deliberate, and mournful, like the universe sighing. Beneath the low brass tone, I began to hear harmonics that rose and fell in patterns too structured to be random. It was as if the sea itself had chosen a key. The first time I spoke to it, I didn't realize I was speaking at all. "I'm listening," I whispered, almost involuntarily, the words sliding out between breaths. The microphone light flickered red, and the waveform responded. For a fraction of a second, the harmonics aligned perfectly with my voice. The system recorded the overlap, and the spectrogram displayed 2 voices merging into one color. Then, the lights went out. In the darkness, I could still see the afterimage of the red waveform burning against my eyelids. It pulsed once every few seconds, steady, patient, like a heartbeat I no longer owned. The emergency lights came on, weak and amber, turning the room into a dim submarine glow. The air smelled of salt. I told myself it was corrosion from the black box casing, but the scent was too pure, too alive. The smell of open sea, of cold wind, and endless horizon. I stepped closer to the recorder. The casing was vibrating, not violently but rhythmically, in tune with the hymn. I could feel it through my fingertips, a vibration that traveled up my arms and into my chest cavity, until my ribs seemed to resonate in sympathy. It wasn't just sound, it was communication through structure, through the language of vibration itself. I spoke again, deliberately this time. "Who are you?" The machine answered not with words, but with a modulation, a deepening of tone that made the floor beneath me tremble. I spent the next several hours mapping the frequency shifts, translating amplitude into symbols, trying to decipher whether the modulation carried meaning. Somewhere around dawn, I noticed something impossible. The pattern matched human cardiac rhythm. Not mine, not the captain's, but something older, slower, immense. I realized then that the sound wasn't random. It was a biological pulse. The ocean itself was alive, or something within it was, and the black box was merely a stethoscope pressed to its chest. That was when the hallucinations began, though hallucination might not be the right word. The line between perception and transmission had dissolved long before that. At first it was subtle, reflections that lagged, shadows that stretched too long, the faint shimmer of water rippling across the lab floor where there was none. Then came the red light. It started as a faint tint behind the window facing the coast, a thin, bleeding hue at the edge of the horizon at 3:17 a.m. The sensors on the roof picked up atmospheric interference, a low-band electromagnetic disturbance moving inland from the Pacific. The tide reading spiked, though the moon was in its waning phase. I looked outside, and the sky over the ocean glowed with a dull, viscous red, like the world's surface had cracked open and bled into the air. The hymn grew louder. It wasn't coming from the speakers anymore. It was coming from beneath the lab, from the ground itself. The walls thrummed. The metal ducts vibrated. The water in the glass on my desk rippled in concentric rings. I could feel pressure in my ears like I was descending deep underwater. I tried to equalize instinctively, swallowing, breathing, but it only made the sound clearer. That was when I heard the captain again. His voice drifted up from the noise, half human, half mechanical, drawn out by the ocean's breath. "We saw it," he said, voice trembling like it was being transmitted through time itself. "It rose beneath us." His words were layered with static, but I could make out fragments. Red, eyes, song, sacrifice. The recording logs showed no playback. The system was off. I wasn't hearing a recording. I was hearing him. Something in me broke then, not from fear, but from understanding. The hymn wasn't a warning. It was an invitation. The black box wasn't preserving the past. It was a relay, a bridge between what had fallen and what waited below. Each crash, each loss, each voice that vanished into the sea had become part of the song. And now it had found me, the one who could listen. The red light outside intensified until the sky looked molten, like the sea had turned inside out. I could see movement beneath the waterline even from here, slow, rhythmic swells that didn't match any natural tide. Something vast was shifting below the surface, turning, aligning itself with the shore. The instruments on my desk began to respond, seismometers registering motion that wasn't seismic. Magnetometers swinging violently as though the Earth's core had changed direction. I tried to step back, but the air had weight, thick and humid like the pressure before a storm. My ears rang with that impossible brass tone, and beneath it, a whisper in the same rhythm as my heartbeat. I realized it was repeating something, not words, but a sequence of tones corresponding to the numbers I had decoded before. The coordinates for Point Nemo. Point Nemo, the loneliest place on Earth. The ocean's dead center. The point farthest from any land. I remembered reading once that it was also the place where old satellites were directed to crash, their remains sinking quietly into the abyss. The sea's graveyard. The perfect mouth for memory. I activated the sonar playback one last time, directing the array toward the coast. The return signal came almost instantly. Usually there would be a delay sound. Takes time to travel that distance, but this was immediate, as though the source was already here, beneath us. I stared at the screen, and for a moment the waveform formed an unmistakable shape. An eye, opening. The hymn surged. It filled the room until I could feel it in my teeth, in my spine, in the soft tissue behind my eyes. The lights pulsed red, not in rhythm with any clock, but with me. Every beat of my heart made the glow intensify. I thought of the captain's final transmission, the one I had once dismissed as delirium. The sea remembers the sky. Now I understood. It was not poetry. It was prophecy. Outside, the horizon burned. The water reflected crimson clouds, but there were no clouds, only the surface of the ocean itself, rising, folding, like something enormous stirring beneath. The hymn reached its crescendo, no longer a sound, but a physical force pressing against my body, and I realized I was no longer hearing through my ears. The vibration was inside me, resonating with every molecule. I stumbled toward the window. The glass was warm to the touch. Through it, I saw shapes moving in the red shimmer. Slow, elegant, spiraling forms that might have been waves or wings or something in between. I felt a pull, not physical but magnetic, a call that reached straight into the marrow. The sound was no longer around me. It was me. I opened my mouth to breathe, and the hymn came out low, trembling, and impossibly ancient. The speakers on the console lit up again, even though the system was disconnected. My voice, or the version of it that had merged with the signal, played back through the room. The horizon is open, it said. The song remembers the listener. The words echoed for a long time, overlapping with the captain's voice, the hymn, and the low mechanical breathing of the black box. Then, for the first time since this began, there was silence. Not absence of sound silence, so profound it hummed, a vacuum pulling every molecule still. I looked up and realized the red glow had reached the ceiling. There was no distinction between sea and sky anymore, only one endless field of color, one vast horizon swallowing itself. And somewhere within that silence, I heard it a second heartbeat, slower than mine, deeper than the earth, answering. I can no longer tell when the recording ends and when I begin. The lab's low hum is folded into the static into breath, and the breath into the slow pulse of something vast pressing against the glass. I used to believe that silence was neutral, that when you strip sound away, what remained was absence. But the ocean outside is teaching me that silence can have shape, can lean forward, can listen back. Tonight, it listens. The black box lies open before me, its metal casing warped slightly from the salt air that has begun to creep through the cracked window. The smell of iron and rainwater has replaced the sterile tang of circuitry. I've been replaying the same fragment for hours, what began as the captain's voice, then the hymn, then the layered resonance that carried both, and now, something else entirely. The signal no longer loops. It evolves. It answers. Every time I breathe, a whisper of delay folds into the room, as though the air itself has become magnetic tape, recording me, storing me. I speak to it softly. "What are you?" I ask, not expecting language in return. The speakers shudder. A deep tone blooms low, like a whale's call dragged through miles of wire. But under it, threaded through the harmonics, is a word, or something shaped like a word. It sounds like Evelyn, not spoken, but remembered. My own name, returned to me from a depth I never reached. The floor vibrates in irregular pulses. It matches my heartbeat for a while, then outruns it, pulling me forward until my palms rest on the table's edge. The waveform on the monitor stretches beyond measurable decibels, yet I feel no pain, only a pressure, gentle, almost coaxing. When I close my eyes, the afterimage of the red horizon flickers behind them, the ocean turned molten, the sky a mirror. I see the reflection of the lab's fluorescent lights hovering there like stars on the water, and then I realize I'm not looking at a reflection at all. I'm looking up, from below. The hymn deepens. Each frequency seems to correspond to an image. A wing sheared from a fuselage, a cockpit window opening into endless dark, coral blooming through torn metal. These are not memories of mine. but of the signal itself, what it has absorbed, what it carries. The air pressure drops. Somewhere, a clock stops ticking. I remember the line from the captain's final transmission, the one hidden beneath the static. To descend is to return what was borrowed. The red glow outside thickens, spilling into the room like a slow sunrise that has lost its direction. Every object casts two shadows, one real, one wavering, as though projected from another time. My reflection in the monitor does the same. The duplicate lags by half a second, mouthing words I haven't said yet. I feel the faint pull of the tide through the floorboards, a current running through wires, through blood. The hymn isn't coming from the speakers anymore. It's resonating inside my bones, a low oscillation that aligns every cell with the rhythm of the sea. I remember studying wave interference, how two identical tones can cancel each other out when perfectly aligned. I wonder if that's what the descent is, erasure through harmony. To become one tone in a greater chord. My predecessor once wrote in her final note, "The ocean dreams in frequencies we mistake for fear." I understand now. The dread isn't a warning, it's translation lag. The body resists because it cannot yet sing in that range. The captain must have heard it first, his voice overwritten not by force but by invitation. The hymn isn't a parasite, it's a language, and it wants to be spoken. The lights flicker, dim, then flare into crimson. My equipment hums a single sustained note that begins to stretch like melted glass. The sound moves through me with a clarity I didn't think possible. I feel the lab dissolve around the edges, the walls curving inward like the inside of a shell. The air tastes of salt. I open my mouth and the tone continues, not from the speakers, but from my own throat. The pitch is perfect. I think of all the recordings I've analyzed over the years, voices trapped in metal, screaming into the indifferent sky. How strange that we built devices to survive us, to speak after impact. But what if survival isn't resistance? What if it's continuation? The hymn understands that. It carries every crash, every plea, every name layered into one continuous note that never ends, only transforms. Outside, the ocean heaves once, immense and slow. The horizon line fractures into veins of scarlet light that pulse like arteries beneath the surface. I see movement, something vast and deliberate rising through the reflection. Not a creature, not in the way we define one, but a presence shaped by sound, sculpted by time. The water bulges outward, forming a curve like a listening ear. The black box emits a final click. The red light fills the room. I take one step forward. The air thickens around my wrists, cool and dense, yet yielding. My reflection on the window's surface smiles half a second before I do. The hymn reaches its crescendo, and for the first time I hear the words clearly, in a language older than the sea. It's not a command, it's a welcome. My last thought is Evelyn Reed, is that descent was never about falling. It's about remembering the direction of origin, the pull toward the first sound ever made, the vibration that birthed the ocean itself. I feel my lungs fill with water, though I am still standing. My heartbeat syncs with the deep pulse outside, and when I exhale, the waveform on the monitor stabilizes into a perfect sine wave. Smooth, endless, alive. The transmission logs itself. Date, unknown. Location, undetermined. Audio content, continuous. The signal purrs, warm and constant. The lab is quiet now. The red horizon outside fades into black, then returns, pulsing like a heartbeat. Somewhere beneath that vast and ancient surface, a voice begins again, not a recording, not an echo, but a continuation of the hymn. And this time, when it speaks, I understand. The 13th floor override. I've always hated the sound fluorescent lights make after midnight. It's not a hum, not exactly, more like a high, metallic whine that gets under your skin and settles behind your eyes. You don't really hear it during the day because there are people talking, printers spitting out reports, footsteps echoing in the halls. But when you're the only one left in a 40-story office building at 1 a.m, that sound becomes the only thing in the world. The IT department is on the 22nd floor, right next to the server room. I had been staring at a blinking error code for over an hour, A database that refused to sync. Something trivial. Something that could have waited until morning. But my boss, Todd, had called at midnight saying it couldn't wait. I didn't even argue. That's the kind of person I am. I fix things. I stay behind when everyone else goes home. I make sure the lights stay on. By the time I finished, the coffee had gone cold. I leaned back in my chair and realized I could hear my heartbeat in the silence. There's a moment when a building goes completely still. That feels like the entire structure is breathing with you. The vents exhale when you do. The elevator shafts creak like joints shifting in the dark. I saved the last log file, shut down the terminal, and told myself I'd earned a night's rest. The hallway outside was a tunnel of blue light. Most of the floor had motion sensors that turned the lights off to save power, so only a few fixtures stayed on islands of cold fluorescence stretching into the distance. My footsteps were the only sound. I remember thinking how empty it all felt. How strange that an entire company's worth of activity could just vanish, leaving nothing but the hum. The elevator at the far end gleamed like a mirror. It was one of those modern ones, brushed steel, touchscreen panel, security camera tucked in the corner. I stepped inside, pressed G, and felt the familiar drop in my stomach as the doors slid shut. I watched the numbers count down. 22, 21, 20. The motion was smooth, silent. For a second, I closed my eyes. Then the elevator stopped. Not a hard stop, no jolt, no sound of brakes. Just a subtle hesitation, like it had lost its sense of direction. I opened my eyes. The floor indicator had frozen on 17. The soft glow of the screen flickered, then dimmed. Okay, I muttered. Great. Perfect. I pressed G again. Nothing. Pressed open door. Nothing. The only sound was that faint electronic hiss, the one elevators make when they're idling, like they're listening. Then I noticed something strange. On the panel, between 12 and 14, a new button had lit up, a number that shouldn't exist. Every building in this company, in this city, really skipped that number. Superstition, architectural habit, whatever you want to call it. It was always 12, then 14. But there it was, glowing faintly orange, as if the metal beneath the screen had remembered something the software tried to erase. I stared at it for a long time, half expecting it to disappear. When it didn't, I told myself it had to be a glitch. Maybe the system had reset, maybe maintenance had been testing some diagnostic mode. I even smiled a little. It's just code, Daniel. You fix code. That's all you do. I reached out and pressed it. The elevator shuddered just once, enough to make my breath hitch. Then it began to move. The sound of the cables above shifted pitch, a long, low groan that vibrated through the floor. The screen blinked once. Then, instead of numbers, a single word appeared. Override. My stomach felt cold. The car slowed again, softer this time, and stopped. The display flickered, glitching between 13 and a blank space. The doors opened, with a hiss of compressed air. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. The hallway beyond didn't look like any floor I knew. The walls were the wrong color, pale green instead of white, and the carpet had an old, patterned design, worn in the middle like it had seen decades of footsteps. The lighting was yellow, not fluorescent, and buzzing faintly. The smell hit me next. Dust. And something else. The faint, sweet scent of flowers left too long in water. I took one step forward. The air felt heavy, like the humidity in summer when a storm is about to break. I called out, "Hello?" My voice echoed strangely, bouncing too long, as if the space stretched farther than it should. There was no answer, only the sound of the lights humming above me. Then the elevator doors began to close. I turned quickly and pressed the button to stop them, but they slid shut anyway, seamless, silent, like they hadn't heard me. I jabbed at the panel, nothing responded. I could still see my reflection faintly in the brushed metal, warped by the dim light. My face looked pale, my eyes too wide. I took a deep breath and told myself to stay calm. You're still in the building. This is a power glitch, a loop. You can fix this. I pressed every button. The lights flickered again. Then, with a sound like a sigh, the elevator began to move, but not down. The floor indicator blinked. 13, 13, 13. I laughed, softly, nervously, because what else can you do when you're stuck in a box that refuses to believe in physics? I leaned my head against the wall and closed my eyes. I could feel the vibration through the metal, like a heartbeat, slow and steady. When the elevator stopped again, I didn't move right away. Part of me didn't want to see what was outside, but curiosity, or maybe defiance, made me press the open door button one more time. The doors slid apart. It was the same hallway, same pale green walls, same hum of yellow light, but something had changed. The air felt colder, and at the far end of the corridor, a shape stood near the wall. It was turned away from me, a figure in white, motionless, facing a door that wasn't there before. I froze. My mind scrambled to make sense of it. Maybe a janitor, maybe security. But even as I thought it, I knew it wasn't. The shape was too still, too quiet. I whispered, "Hey, nothing." Then the lights flickered, just once, and for a heartbeat, the reflection in the elevator doors behind me showed two figures instead of one. I stepped back inside and slammed the close door button. This time, it obeyed. The door slid shut, sealing me back inside the mirrored box. My chest felt tight. My hands were shaking. The floor indicator went dark. In the reflection, my face was still there, but the background, the walls behind me, had changed. They looked older, cracked, as if the metal had aged decades in seconds. The air smelled of rust and something faintly burnt. I reached out and touched the surface. It was warm, and for the first time, I realized the elevator wasn't just malfunctioning. It was remembering. As the hum deepened and the faint vibration returned, I stared at the darkened screen and saw the number 13 flicker back to life, pulsing like a heartbeat. I tried to laugh again, to say something to fill the silence, but my throat felt dry. I whispered, "Just take me down." The elevator didn't move. It only answered with a single sound, faint, distant, like the echo of footsteps in a corridor I couldn't see, getting closer, in rhythm with my own heart. The elevator doors opened with a sound that didn't belong to the 21st century, a long, mechanical exhalation like something rusted waking from sleep. Daniel blinked at the light flickering overhead. The floor display read 13, glowing a dull amber red that bled into the metal frame. For a moment, he didn't move. The hallway before him was silent and gray, its walls blistered and peeling like dead skin. The air smelled faintly of iron and something older, mildew, perhaps, or rot buried under layers of paint. There was no hum of air conditioning, no faint vibration of electricity like every other floor of the building. Just the low, endless stillness of a place that shouldn't exist. He checked the control panel again. The button for 13 had vanished, as if it had never been there. The other buttons flickered dimly, their light trembling in sync with the failing fluorescent bulb above his head. Daniel swallowed, tasting metal on his tongue. "Maintenance test," he muttered, though the words fell flat, devoured by the stale air. His rational mind clung to any explanation. Maybe a glitch, maybe a backup generator misfire. But deep inside, beneath the logic, something primitive whispered, "Don't step out." Still, curiosity was a stronger hand than fear. He stepped forward. The soles of his shoes made no sound on the cracked linoleum. The hall stretched on much farther than the blueprints ever showed, longer than the length of the entire building, it seemed. The walls were a faded beige, marked by what looked like water stains, except the stains were handprints, faint but too high, as if made by someone trying to climb upward. A flicker of movement caught his eye. At the far end of the hall, beneath a single dying light, someone stood, or rather, something stood still. A woman, white fabric, tattered, the hem of her gown dragging on the floor like fog. Her hair was black, heavy, unkempt, spilling down her back. She didn't move. Daniel froze. His throat tightened, the instinctive panic of prey realizing it had been seen. But she wasn't facing him. She stood, turned slightly toward a door, a rusted one, the number plate above it half torn off. He took a careful step back, inching toward the elevator. The moment his shoe touched the seam of the metal threshold, the overhead lights blinked out. Dull darkness. A second later, a dim emergency glow sputtered to life from somewhere above. The hallway was empty. The woman was gone. Daniel's pulse thundered in his ears. He slammed the door close button repeatedly, fingers trembling. The elevator did not respond. Instead, the control panel flickered and changed one by one. The floor indicators faded till only 13 remained. Then, the elevator dinged. The doors slid shut. Slow, deliberate, almost reluctant. The cab trembled as it began to descend. But the motion was wrong, unsteady, uneven, as though the cables were straining against something heavy. Daniel backed into a corner, breathing shallowly. He watched the floor indicator, but it didn't change. It stayed fixed on 13, pulsing like a heartbeat. Seconds dragged into minutes. Then, the elevator stopped again. Another ding. The doors opened. Same hallway. Same rotted walls. Same flickering light. Only different. The stains on the wall had spread. The air was colder, thicker, damp like breath against glass. And this time Daniel saw her again closer. 5 steps from the elevator. She wasn't facing him. Not yet. But her head tilted slightly, as if she were listening. The silence pressed in on him from all sides. He could hear the faintest sound, not from her, but from behind him, inside the elevator shaft. A slow, dragging sound. Something moving along the cable. He jabbed at the control panel, hitting ground floor, over and over. Nothing. The buttons flickered uselessly, their faint light dying with each press. Then came the sound. Clack, clack. Soft, deliberate, like the tapping of heels on tile, but uneven as though one shoe were broken or dragging something heavy. The sound came from the hallway. It grew louder, nearer, echoing off the peeling walls. Daniel backed farther into the elevator, his hand flat against the cold metal. "Please," he whispered, not sure to whom. The lights inside the elevator dimmed, the last bit of artificial life flickering like a dying breath. The tapping stopped. For a long, unbearable moment, there was nothing. Then, the woman breathed. It was faint, but real. A soft exhalation, shaky, wet. Daniel's knees nearly gave out. He could hear it, the kind of breath that came from something that shouldn't need air anymore. And then, she turned. Her face was not there, not gone, but not there like someone had smeared her features clean, leaving only a blank, smooth skin that reflected the dim light. A faceless shape wearing a wedding gown that had once been white, but was now streaked with dark stains, brown at the edges, black at the hem. She stepped closer. Daniel slammed the door close button again and again, his thumb bruising against the plastic. The door stuttered, then slid shut halfway. A pale hand shot forward, pressing against the gap. The door groaned. Her fingers curled inward, nails scraping metal. Daniel's heart pounded so violently he thought it might burst through his ribs. He screamed, wordless, raw. Then suddenly the elevator jerked. The door sealed. The hand was gone. He fell to his knees, gasping. The elevator was moving again, fast this time, the walls vibrating with speed. Daniel slumped against the corner, his mind fractured between disbelief and dread. He told himself it was over, that he was going down, that he would see the lobby, the security desk, the fluorescent safety of the normal world. The elevator slowed. He looked up. The display read, 13. No, he whispered. No, 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 please. Ding. The doors opened. Same hallway. But now, the walls were pulsing. The stains, no longer. Stains were fresh, wet, red. The smell hit him like a slap. Iron, decay, blood. The floor was slick. Something dripped from the ceiling in steady intervals. She was there, waiting, Right at the threshold, Daniel pressed himself against the corner, shaking his head violently. "Please," he muttered. "I didn't mean to. I don't belong here." The elevator lights went out. The last thing he saw was the edge of her gown moving, slow, steady, like a curtain in a windless room. And in the dark, her voice came not from outside, but from inside the elevator, just beside his ear. "You do now." The elevator plummeted. He didn't even have time to scream. The weightlessness was instant, gut-wrenching. Papers flew from his bag, keys and phone spiraling in the black. Then impact, but not the kind of impact that ends things. Instead, a soft thud, like landing on carpet. Daniel opened his eyes. The elevator was intact. The doors were open, and beyond them his office floor. The same sterile lights. The same vending machine humming near the break room. The same quiet emptiness of 1:17 a.m. He stumbled out, half laughing, half crying. He pressed the close button from the outside, as if slamming a door against a nightmare. The doors sealed shut, soundlessly. The floor display blinked back to normal 1412G. No 13. Daniel backed away, shaking. He reached for his ID card, swiping it at the exit gate. The scanner beeped red. He frowned, tried again. Another red blink. He looked down. The card wasn't his. The plastic was cracked, the photo half faded. In place of his name, there was another name he didn't recognize. The access level read in worn letters. Access. Floor 13. His hand trembled as he dropped it. The sound of the card hitting the tile echoed down the hall, too loud, too long. Then, from the direction of the elevator, came a ding. Daniel froze. The doors were opening again. Light spilled out, not white, but the same dull amber red. And faintly, from the darkness beyond, came the soft rhythm of heels tapping tile. Clack, clack, clack. And beneath it, a voice, whispering his name. Daniel ran, not out of courage, not even out of clarity, just the raw, animal instinct of someone who had looked too long into something that should not exist. His footsteps echoed in the empty corridor, bouncing off glass and marble, the sound too loud, too human, in a building that suddenly felt abandoned by the world. He reached the lobby, or what he thought was the lobby. The automatic doors loomed ahead, glass gleaming in the fluorescent light. Beyond them, the city pulsed faintly under the rain. Safety. Normalcy. He pushed the handle. The door didn't move. He pushed harder, shoulder against it, metal bending under his weight. Still nothing. The rain outside shimmered like a projection on a screen, glistening, but unreal. Behind him, the elevator dinged. That soft, cheerful sound. Too gentle to belong to something cruel. Daniel turned slowly. The doors were open again. No one stood there, but the red glow from inside seemed to breathe, pulsing faintly with the rhythm of a heartbeat. He took a step back. His shoes squeaked faintly against the marble. "Stop," he whispered to himself, to the building, to the air that seemed to close tighter around him. He bolted for the emergency exit. The stairwell door was heavy, painted gray, labeled fire escape only. Alarm will sound. He didn't care. He slammed it open and rushed inside. The stairwell was colder, unnaturally so. A faint draft rose from below, carrying the smell of dust and rusted iron. The lights flickered, humming faintly, casting long shadows that trembled like breathing things. Daniel descended. 12th floor. 11th. 10th. He counted, breath ragged, his hand sliding along the railing slick with condensation. 9th. 8th. The air thickened, heavier with each turn of the stairs. His lungs burned. His vision swam in gray. 7th. 6th. 5th. The light buzzed overhead, growing dimmer with each flight. The walls seemed closer now, pressing in, the handrails warped, paint peeling like scabbed skin. 4th. 3rd. He paused, dizzy. He could swear he'd been here before, the same dark stain on the wall, the same flicker in the light. He looked up. The numbers on the sign beside the door read, Floor 13. His heart stopped. No, he breathed, shaking his head violently. That's not possible. Em. He turned back down the stairs faster this time, almost falling. The steps blurred beneath him. He didn't stop until he reached another landing. He looked at the door, floor 13. He grabbed the handle and shook it, desperate. Locked. Again, he ran, stumbling, panting, dizzy with fear. The next door, floor 13. He screamed, a sound that cracked his throat. Stop. The stairwell echoed the word back to him, warped and distant, like someone whispering it from just behind his shoulder. He pressed himself against the wall, shaking. His breathing came in short, shallow bursts, somewhere below faint and rhythmic. Clack, clack, clack. He froze. The sound was unmistakable. The soft, deliberate tap of heels on concrete. Closer. He bolted through the nearest door, not caring what floor it was. The door opened onto a hallway he knew, the same long stretch of beige linoleum and humming lights. Only now the air felt heavier, charged, as if static filled every molecule. The sign on the wall read 13. Of course it did. He stumbled forward, clutching his stomach, his whole body trembling from adrenaline and nausea. He needed to find someone. Anyone. Security, janitorial, even another trapped soul. But the offices were all dark. He pressed his face to the glass panels, empty desks, overturned chairs, monitors flickering with static. No people, no movement, except a reflection. In one of the dark screens, behind him, a shape, white dress, black hair, standing perfectly still, just far enough that the details blurred. He turned, slowly. The hallway was empty, but now he could smell her, that faint scent of wet cloth and iron, like something washed but never clean. The air rippled, subtly. The fluorescent lights above flickered in unison, as if reacting to her unseen presence. Daniel ran again. The corridor bent sharply left, then right, then another turn that shouldn't have existed. The architecture was wrong now, the halls looping into one another. Stairwells leading to themselves, rooms repeating with slight differences. Every door he opened revealed another version of the same hallway, sometimes mirrored, sometimes stretched impossibly long. And always, at the far end, the faint shimmer of a white dress. He tried not to look directly. When he did, she was closer. He found an office marked security room and slammed the door behind him. The monitors inside buzzed faintly. Dozens of black and white screens displayed every hallway in the building, or what should have been every hallway. But every feed showed the same thing. The elevator doors. Open. Empty. He stared, transfixed. The image shimmered slightly, static dancing across the edges. He leaned closer, squinting. Something moved. A flicker of motion inside the elevator, like a shadow shifting behind glass. Then, on every monitor at once, the same face appeared, smooth, featureless, pale, filling the entire frame. Daniel staggered back, knocking over a chair. The screens crackled, then went black. From the hallway outside, a faint ding. He looked toward the door. The little light above the frame glowed red. She was here. He tried to wedge the chair under the handle, hands shaking so hard he nearly dropped it. His breath came in ragged bursts. "You're not real," he whispered. You're not real." But the door began to rattle, softly at first, then violently, as if someone on the other side was testing it, pushing it open one deliberate inch at a time. The air grew cold enough to sting. He grabbed the nearest object, a metal flashlight, and backed toward the far corner. The door creaked, stopped. Silence. Daniel waited, every nerve screaming. The silence stretched long enough for him to believe, briefly, that she'd gone. Then maybe the loop had broken. Then the sound came not from the door, from behind him. A soft, wet whisper. "Daniel." He turned. The flashlight slipped from his hand. The reflection on the black screen in front of him was smiling. Not his smile, not human. The blank face stretched, folding inward. revealing something like teeth beneath smooth skin. He stumbled backward, slamming into the wall, breathing like a drowning man. The screen flickered. Words appeared, grainy and distorted. "You belong here." The words repeated, line after line, until every monitor glowed with them. "You belong here. You belong here. You belong here." Daniel screamed, smashing one of the screens with a flashlight. Sparks flew, but the words burned on the others, glowing brighter, searing red. Then, everything went dark. He was alone again, in a silence so deep he could hear his own heartbeat, and beneath it, faintly, a second heartbeat. Not his. He opened the door, shaking. The hallway was empty, but something was different now. The lights no longer flickered. The air was warm, clean, humming with electricity. He turned a corner and froze. He was back in the main lobby. The glass doors gleamed. The rain outside looked real this time, streaking the streetlights in pale gold. He laughed, weakly, almost sobbing. He reached for his pocket, pulling out the keycard again. Maybe it would work now. Maybe he'd wake up from all this. The card read, "Assess, floor 13. He swallowed hard, blinking back tears. No. The elevator behind him dinged. He turned. The doors opened. Inside, the light was soft, white, clean, normal. The display read G. A voice crackled faintly from the overhead speaker. "Ground floor." It said cheerful, robotic. The same tone he'd heard every day for years. It sounded safe. Human. He hesitated. Then he stepped inside. The doors closed. The elevator began to move down this time. Smooth, real, steady. Daniel exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. He laughed quietly, his head against the wall, tears drying on his face. When the elevator stopped, he looked up. The display read 13. His smile faded. The doors opened. The hallway stretched before him, familiar, infinite, waiting. And as the lights flickered, the first sound came again. Clack, clack, clack. The loop had begun. When I woke, the light was wrong. It came from everywhere and nowhere, a white hum that filled the space, like fog. Too bright to be natural, too dim to be comforting. The floor beneath me was smooth, cold metal, not tile, not carpet, but the kind of surface you only find in maintenance corridors, places no one's meant to see. I tried to move, but my limbs felt heavy, like I'd been underwater. My head pounded with a rhythmic pulse, the kind that syncs perfectly with your own heartbeat until you can't tell which is which. I looked up, and the walls were breathing, not visibly, not like lungs, but every time I blinked, they seemed to shift slightly closer, the angles changing, the shadows redrawing themselves into shapes that almost resembled symbols. Lines, curves, looping in patterns that reminded me of programming syntax, or maybe circuitry, something alive, something meant to process and repeat. I forced myself up, breathing hard. "Hello?" My voice came out cracked, hollow. The echo was wrong too, no natural delay. Just a kind of metallic doubling, like the sound was being recorded, played back an instant later, slightly off time. Somewhere far away, I heard the elevator ding. It was faint, but it sliced through everything, a tiny, cheerful note floating in sterile air. Then came the hum, a mechanical whir that built and built until it became almost melodic. The lights along the ceiling flickered once, and a faint pattern appeared on the wall. Override. Floor 13 active. It wasn't printed. It bled through, as though it were projected from inside the wall itself. My name appeared next. User Daniel T. Ross. Authorized. I felt my throat tighten. Authorized for what? I whispered. A faint click responded, followed by a static burst, soft, deliberate, almost like laughter. The corridor stretched ahead endlessly. No doors, no stairwell, just that metallic hum and the faint scent of ozone. I started walking, slow at first, then faster, my footsteps ringing hollow in the empty air. After what felt like minutes or hours, the wall to my right rippled. Not an illusion, not a reflection, it moved, like liquid metal reacting to sound. A rectangle extruded from the surface, forming a kind of panel, and I could see faint green lines scrolling across it. Code. Lines and lines of system text, too fast to read, but familiar in rhythm, the syntax of the building's automated control interface. Except it wasn't right. The words were wrong, human words, scattered among machine language. Override protocol. Loop maintained. Entity detected. Daniel T. Ross. Error. Entity not human. Error. Loop unstable. Rewrite required. I stepped back, heart pounding. What the hell is this? The panel pulsed once and changed. The lines rearranged into something like a message. How do you remember when you left? I froze. How you didn't. The letters burned for a moment, then faded, replaced by a single blinking cursor. I reached out, stupid, instinctive, and touched the panel. It was warm. A surge of static rushed through me, like touching a live wire. Images exploded behind my eyes. The elevator doors opening, the flicker of a white dress, the rain outside that wasn't rain, the sound of my own voice shouting in an empty stairwell, and underneath it all, a soft rhythm, a pulse, the same beat that had replaced my heartbeat hours ago. When the flash ended, I was somewhere else. The lights had dimmed. The corridor was gone. I was standing inside what looked like a server room, rows of humming towers, cables snaking across the floor, little red LEDs blinking in perfect unison. The hum filled everything, vibrating through the floor, into my chest, into my bones. One of the screens flickered to life. It showed the elevator interior empty, silent. Then another screen lit up the lobby, still and frozen, with the glass doors shimmering faintly as though underwater. A voice came through the speakers, low, modulated, almost human but not quite. Daniel. I swallowed hard. Who are you? You already know. The voice wasn't male or female. It felt assembled, stitched together from fragments of other voices. Echoes of me. The woman. The elevator's synthetic tone. You left the door open. I shook my head. No, I didn't. I tried to leave. It wouldn't. You left it open. It said again calmly. And now it has you. A soft click echoed behind me. I turned, and one of the server racks was sliding open, slow and deliberate. Inside was a single black monitor. The glass cracked slightly, the screen glowing faintly with a deep red light. On it, a floor directory flickered. 112 blank. 14. Then the cursor blinked twice, and a number appeared between them. 13. The elevator dinged again. This time, the sound came from everywhere. The lights in the server room began to pulse in rhythm, flickering faster and faster, until they synced perfectly with that mechanical chime. I backed away, but the air was thick now, viscous, like moving through water. Every breath tasted metallic. I reached another wall panel and slammed my hand against it. The interface lit up. Lines of code spilled across, scrolling so fast I could barely focus, but words began to stand out between them. English, human fragments buried inside machine logic. The floor exists because you do. Do you exist because it remembers? We keep it alive. We keep you. I staggered back. Stop. Just stop. The hum deepened, turning into a subsonic drone that rattled the room. The monitors shook. The red LEDs blinked faster. Do you want to leave? He hesitated. Yes. The sound stopped. Instantly. Silence. Then the words appeared, one by one. To leave, you must rewrite yourself. Before I could react, the nearest screen changed. It now displayed me standing there, exactly as I was, hand on the panel, eyes wide. The camera angle was impossible. It was from behind my own head. I turned. No one there. When I looked back, the version of me on the screen had started typing. Override confirmed. New entity registration. Daniel Tetros. Status. System. My stomach turned. The figure on the screen smiled faintly. Welcome home. The servers hummed louder, like applause. The light turned crimson. I stumbled backward, tripping over cables, crashing into the rack behind me. Sparks flew. The air smelled of ozone and burnt plastic. My body convulsed, or maybe it was the floor vibrating. Everything pulsed together now, perfectly synced. The hum, the lights, my heartbeat, the mechanical rhythm of the elevator's chime echoing somewhere deep inside the walls. And then I heard her. The woman. The whisper. "He's not leaving." I turned. She was standing at the far end of the room, still in that same ruined wedding dress, hair hanging wet over her face. Her skin shimmered faintly under the red light, translucent, almost digital, like she was being rendered, frame by frame. "You stayed?" she said. Her voice came through the speakers, not her mouth. "You kept the floor alive." I backed away until my shoulders hit the cold metal wall. "I don't want this. I want to leave. I want to go home." "There is no home," she whispered. "Only the system that remembers it." She stepped closer. With each movement, the lights above her flickered in sync, as if she were powered by them, as if every flicker fed her shape. "You're part of it now. You understand the code." "I am." I shook my head, tears blurring my vision. "No, I don't." "You do," she said softly, almost kindly. "You wrote it." The servers roared. Screens lit up one by one, displaying fragments of text logs, diagnostics, but all bearing the same header. Runtime file, Daniel R13, OVR. I stumbled closer to read. They were transcripts of me, every word I'd spoken since I entered the building, line by line, perfectly time-stamped. And at the bottom of the latest entry, "Next execution. Loop restart." I screamed, slammed the monitor with my fist. It shattered, light bleeding out like liquid. But when I turned, the room was already gone. I was standing in the elevator, alone. The air was still. The lights glowed faintly gold, warm and artificial. The panel gleamed, untouched. The numbers blinked softly, 1 through 12. No, 13. My reflection in the polished doors looked almost normal, except for the faint shimmer around the edges of ghosting, like a double exposure. The elevator voice chimed, soft and calm. "Select floor." I pressed G. It lit up obediently. The hum started, gentle at first, then deeper, resonant, filling the cabin with a low vibration. The walls seemed to breathe again, faintly, as if alive. I closed my eyes, trying to feel real. The hum grew louder, folding into a faint whisper beneath the mechanical tone. One voice, then two, then dozens, layered like a chorus of code and memory. The elevator slowed. The doors opened. I looked out into the lobby. It was perfect, clean, normal, but through the glass, the city wasn't moving. The cars, the rain, the neon signs, all frozen mid-motion, like a paused video frame. The hum continued, steady, patient, and then the elevator spoke again. Override, residual code uploaded. My reflection in the glass turned its head just slightly before I did, and smiled. I thought I had escaped, that the nightmare had dissolved into nothing more than a glitch in my mind, a residue left by exhaustion and the sterile hum of fluorescent light. But when I opened my eyes the next morning in my small Brooklyn apartment, the clock on the wall read exactly 1. 0 amperes. M, the second hand frozen between 2 marks, and my phone displayed a single notification. Access, floor 13. No carrier, no signal, no date. Just that. As if the system had rebooted, but not the world I belonged to. I tried the light switch. Nothing. I tried the laptop. The screen flickered to life, spilling white code on a black void. Lines scrolling endlessly. Override. Floor. 13. Loop. Equals true. The air felt heavy, humming with static. I opened the door. The hallway was unnervingly silent. When I pressed the elevator button, the door slid open instantly. Bright, immaculate, waiting. The floor panel gleamed from 1 to 12, but the 13 button blinked faintly, a weak pulse, like a dying heart. I didn't mean to step inside, but my body moved anyway, as though something had already written the command. The doors sealed behind me. No movement, no air, just the metallic echo of my breathing. I pressed G, desperate for ground level, but the elevator began to rise. Slowly, the display ticked upward. 3, 6, 9, then stopped. 13, a soft ping. The doors parted. The hallway stretched ahead, the same decaying corridor, its wallpaper stripped and peeling, the air thick with mildew and rust. I could smell the rot, taste the dampness of old metal and forgotten air. Then, faintly, the sound of footsteps. Heels, measured. 3 beats, again and again, approaching. I backed up, slamming the close button over and over, but the door stayed still. A pale hand, slick, wet, trembling, curled around the edge and pulled it open inch by inch, like someone lifting a coffin lid. She stood there, the woman, in the white wedding dress. Only it wasn't white anymore. It was stained with dirt, blood, mold soaked in the color of the grave. Her face was blank, smooth like wax. Yet from the hollow where her mouth should have been, came 1,000 whispering voices, layered and unending. "You're not leaving this time, Daniel." I screamed, but no sound came. The air swallowed it whole. She stepped in beside me. The lights went out. I could feel her presence, her wet hair dripping on the metal floor, the scent of wilted flowers and burned incense coiling through the darkness. Then came the system voice. Calm, mechanical, system override initiated. User, Daniel H. access granted. The elevator dropped. I hit the ceiling, then the floor, weightless and crushed all at once. The cables shrieked. My heart slammed in my throat. But then I realized I wasn't falling down. I was falling up. The world flipped. The metal burned hot. The woman's whisper brushed my ear. Every loop needs someone to stay. Then crash. Silence. The lights flickered back. I was sprawled on the floor. The doors slid open. Ground level. The lobby. The same potted plants. The security guard dozing at his desk. I ran. Through the hall. Across the lobby. Through the glass doors and stopped. Because in the reflection staring back at me wasn't me. It was her. Wearing my suit. My tie. My ID badge. Smiling with lips I didn't have anymore. I stumbled backward. The guard looked up, startled. "You okay, man? Why'd you come back at this hour?" I opened my mouth, but the voice that came out wasn't mine. It was high, hollow, like wind through a vent. "I'm just going down to the 13th floor. The guard froze. Then, slowly, he nodded like he'd heard that sentence before. Many times. He tapped his card. The elevator chimed. The doors opened. I stepped inside. This time, there was no fear. I knew exactly where I was, who I was. The control panel no longer showed numbers, just a single symbol, glowing faintly infinity. I pressed it. The doors closed. No sound, no time, only the echo of my footsteps beside hers, the rhythm of eternity folding in on itself, the loop tightening, drawing us down, down, into the circuitry of the building's memory. Floor 13 isn't a place. It's a process, a recursive loop written in dead code, storing every soul that ever pressed the wrong button. I can feel my memories being overwritten, my name dissolving, and each time someone new steps into the elevator, each time they glance at the panel and frown, I see the doors open, the lights spill in, and I hear them say, 13th floor? But this building doesn't have a 13th floor. And that's when the system starts again. I smile. The doors close. Initialization begins, and deep within the dark, a single line of code runs forever. Override. Floor. 13. Loop. Permanent equals true. The Sleepwalker's sketchbook. It started, as these things often do, with a dream Sarah could not quite remember, a feeling that clung to her skin like humidity, dense and metallic, the taste of graphite in her mouth before she had even opened her eyes. She woke with that dull ache that belongs to sleepless nights, the kind that feels stretched, unreal, a feverish imitation of rest. There was light bleeding through the blinds, a gray urban dawn that gave no comfort, and the silence of her studio apartment hung heavy, patient, like a sheet waiting to be pulled back. For a few long moments, she simply lay there. The ceiling above was mottled with faint cracks she had memorized over years of insomnia, cracks that she sometimes traced with her gaze when she couldn't sleep, pretending they were rivers viewed from above. But this morning, something in the pattern had shifted. It wasn't the ceiling itself, it was the way her mind seemed to catch on it, snag like fabric on a nail. Something had changed during the night. When she finally rose, the first thing she noticed was the smell: paper, graphite, and that faint tang of metal that comes when a pencil sharpener has been overworked. Her workspace occupied most of her small apartment, a wide oak desk, stacks of sketchbooks, and half-finished commissions for children's books and fashion catalogs. It was the kind of creative clutter that made sense only to the one who made it. But what didn't make sense, what drew her immediately forward, was the sketchbook lying open in the middle of the desk. Sarah didn't remember leaving it open. The page was turned to a fresh sheet, smooth and white except for a faint smudge in the center. The graphite lines were deliberate, strong, too sure to be a sleepwalker's accidental doodle. The drawing was unmistakably hers, same style, same pressure, same fluid precision, but there was something different in the composition, a coldness, an intent that didn't belong to her. It depicted a forest. Not the kind she'd ever drawn before. This one was skeletal. The trees twisted and broken, their trunks like exposed bones, splintered in unnatural angles. The ground was a maze of roots that looked more like veins, pulsing through a mist that seemed to blur even on paper. There was no color, no shading to soften the starkness, just line after line of careful, obsessive precision. Sarah stood there for a long time, the chill of the hardwood floor biting through her socks. She touched the page, the graphite smudged slightly under her fingertip fresh. Her hand trembled as she picked up the pencil that lay beside the book. It was warm, as though it had been held for hours. She tried to recall the night before. She remembered working late, answering an email from her editor, making tea. Then nothing. A gap, smooth and soundless. Her old problem, the one she had learned to live with but never understand. The sleepwalking. The doctors had called it a complex parasomnia. They said it wasn't dangerous, that it often manifested as automatic behavior. But drawing, that was new. She closed the sketchbook, perhaps a little too quickly, and set it aside. But as the day passed, she found herself glancing toward it again and again, like one glances toward a door left ajar. That night, she left her sketchbook closed, stacked beneath a few heavier art books for good measure. She told herself it was nothing, just a quirk, an exhausted mind playing tricks. Yet sleep came uneasily, fractured by flashes of movement she could not place. In one dream, she remembered standing in a forest, the same one she realized later that she had drawn. The air there was dense with fog and the faint scent of pine and rust. The ground gave slightly under her bare feet, and somewhere distant, she could hear what sounded like whispering, not words, but the rhythm of words, the syllables of wind. When she woke, the weight on her chest told her she had been dreaming of something terrible. She rolled over, breath uneven. The stack of books she had placed over the sketchbook had shifted. They lay scattered across the floor, spines bent open like dead birds. Her sketchbook sat once again in the center of the desk, open to a new page. She did not want to look, but she did. The new drawing was darker, denser, almost frantic in its detail. The forest was there again, but now something stood among the trees, a figure, tall and faceless, its proportions wrong, like it had been drawn from memory through a layer of fog. It faced the viewer directly. Its hands, if they were hands, hung long and narrow, tapering into what looked like the faint outline of roots. The pencil strokes were aggressive. She could see the grooves carved into the paper, as though whoever or whatever had drawn it pressed too hard. Her name was signed in the bottom corner in her own handwriting. Sarah felt a prickle along her neck. She didn't remember signing it. She didn't remember drawing any of it. The rest of that morning blurred into a nervous routine: coffee, phone calls, forced normalcy. But every noise in her apartment seemed louder, sharper. The hum of the refrigerator became a drone, the ticking of the wall clock, a kind of heartbeat, and beneath it all, a whispering texture that she couldn't unhear, like pencil on paper, just at the edge of perception. She told herself she'd throw the sketchbook away, burn it if she had to, but she didn't. Instead, she tucked it into a drawer, wrapped in a pillowcase. That night, she set up her phone on a small tripod near the desk, its camera aimed directly at the drawer. It felt foolish, even paranoid. Yet when the lights went out, the sense of being watched came not from outside, but from within, the faint awareness that something in the room was waiting for her to sleep. When she did, it was like falling into water, soundless, viscous. In the morning, she woke to the alarm, disoriented. Sunlight slipped across the desk in a pale stripe, touching the corner of the drawer. Her heart was already racing before she reached for the phone. The video played in silence for a few seconds. Darkness, the faint outline of the room. Then, around 2:47 a.m., the drawer slid open. She appeared in the frame a few seconds later. Her eyes were open but empty, her movements precise and slow. She took the sketchbook out, sat down, and began to draw. The motion was continuous, deliberate. Her hand moved with uncanny control, her fingers tense but graceful, the pencil scratching at a steady rhythm like breathing. Then something else. A shadow formed around her hand. It wasn't the light, it was too defined, too solid. A second hand, translucent but visible, settled over hers. It was thinner, longer. The fingers jointed wrong, and when it moved, her hand moved with it, the pencil carving deeper, faster. Sarah dropped the phone. The sound startled her cat from under the table. She stared at the wall for a long time before she found the courage to look again. On the final frame, the translucent hand guided hers upward, lifting the pencil toward her face. She flinched as she watched herself draw something on her own cheek, just a faint curve, a line, a suggestion of a smile. Her pulse hammered. She turned toward the mirror by the door. There was no mark, not really, just the faintest smudge of graphite, as if something had grazed her skin in the night. But when she looked closer, she realized her reflection was smiling ever so slightly while she wasn't. The expression stayed even after she stopped breathing. Outside, a car horn echoed down the street, sharp and ordinary, a reminder of the living world. But in the corner of her apartment, the drawer she had closed now stood slightly ajar, a faint smell of graphite curling into the air. And beneath that smell something older, metallic, and patient, as if the paper itself had begun to breathe. When the second drawing appeared, Sarah didn't scream. She only stood there for a long time, the morning light barely cutting through the grime on her apartment window, staring at the open sketchbook on her desk as if waiting for it to explain itself. The smell of graphite and turpentine hung heavy in the air, like a memory that refused to fade. The drawing was precise, far more detailed than her waking hand could ever manage. It depicted the same fog-drenched forest as before, but now there was someone standing beneath one of the skeletal trees. A human form, tall, faceless, body composed of thin, intersecting lines like a technical diagram of a man not yet finished. Its hands were raised not in greeting, not in threat, but in something like invitation. Sarah's pencil was still where she'd left it, balanced carefully on the open page, its graphite worn down to a fine, exhausted point. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and felt the page. It was still warm. She hadn't drawn last night, she knew that. She remembered going to bed, the soft hum of the city below, the sirens, the creak of the ceiling fan. She remembered nothing after that. Yet the evidence sat there, not a product of imagination, but of movement, of pressure, of touch. She rubbed her palms together, tracing the faint smudge of charcoal beneath her nails. It felt familiar, almost comforting. Later, when she tried to eat, she realized she hadn't been hungry for days. Her eyes ached. The mirror above the sink reflected something pale and restless. A woman fading into the grain of her own apartment. She picked up her phone, hesitated, then set it down again. Who would she even call? An art dealer? A doctor? A priest? That night she left the lights on. Every single one. The bulbs hummed faintly as the hours stretched thin. She sat before the sketchbook, its blank pages gleaming like open wounds, and waited. Midnight came, then one, then two. Her eyelids began to droop, and when her head tilted, her breath slowed. The pencil, still on the desk, began to roll, and then motion. The camera she'd placed earlier that evening caught everything. In the frame, she rose from her chair with the slow grace of someone moving underwater. Her eyes were open, but unfocused. She picked up the pencil, her hand trembling not from exhaustion, but from resistance, as though fighting against an invisible force that insisted on precision. The pencil met paper, and that's when the air in the room began to shift. The lights dimmed, one by one, though no switch had been touched. The shadows elongated, wrapping around her like fabric. A faint whisper, low, rhythmic, began to seep through the audio track, like the sound of someone drawing breath too close to the microphone. Sarah's hand moved in jagged arcs, strokes too deliberate to be random, too mechanical to be human. The shape on the paper formed slowly, not a forest this time, not a faceless man, but something deeper in composition. A house, her apartment, every corner, every object rendered in exact detail, down to the cup beside her, the stain on the rug. And inside that drawing, sitting at the same desk, was herself. Drawing. It was recursive, endless. A depiction of a depiction of a depiction, a hall of mirrors where time bent inward. At precisely 3:12 a.m., the figure in the sketch, the smaller, drawn Sarah, turned its head toward the viewer, toward the real camera, and smiled. The next morning, Sarah vomited black. Not blood, not ink, something in between. Her skin was clammy, her heartbeat irregular. But when she went to destroy the sketchbook, she found the pages fused together, as though the graphite had melted into the paper itself. The drawings pulsed faintly, like veins beneath parchment. That was when she noticed it, the faint outline of fingers beneath the canvas on her easel. At first, she thought it was a trick of light, but when she moved closer, she saw the canvas breathe, a shallow, rhythmic expansion, in and out, as if the painting itself were alive. Sarah froze. The smell of damp earth filled the room. Her ears rang with a frequency she couldn't identify. The outline pressed outward again, a hand-shaped bulge distorting the fabric of the canvas, fingertips dragging faint grooves beneath the painted surface. Something inside was trying to reach out. She backed away, one slow step at a time, her shoulder hitting the wall. Then, with a sound like tearing flesh, the canvas split. Not outward, inward, as though something had sucked the air from behind it, dragging the fabric inward toward a dark cavity that shouldn't have existed. For a moment, Sarah swore she saw the forest again, the one from her drawings flickering inside that void, and then it was gone. She didn't remember falling asleep, only waking. The camera still recording, the room undisturbed, but on her desk, a new drawing waited. It wasn't of the forest. It wasn't of her apartment. It was of the back of her own head. Perfectly detailed. Even the tiny cut she'd gotten shaving the night before. She flipped through the previous pages, scanning the chronology of her dreams. Each image had grown more specific, more invasive. They no longer depicted scenes, they recorded memory. They remembered things she didn't. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. One message. You don't remember drawing the forest either. No signature. No number traceable. Just those words. For the first time in years, Sarah left her apartment. The city looked strange. too bright, too textured, like it too had been drawn by an uncertain hand. She felt eyes on her from the windows, from reflections in car doors, but no one stared. The paranoia was her own, yet she couldn't shake the sensation that someone or something was sketching her movements as she walked. When she returned home, dusk had settled. The light bled across the floor like liquid rust. The sketchbook waited, obediently, on her desk. Its pages fluttered once, though no breeze passed. Sarah sat down, exhaustion coiling around her bones. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "If I stop drawing, maybe it stops." And, for the first time, she tore out a page. The paper screamed. It wasn't sound, not exactly, more like a sudden pressure in the skull, a feedback loop that made her vision blur. She stumbled backward, holding the torn sheet. It was blank, completely blank. She exhaled, relieved, until the walls began to change color. The blank page in her hand pulsed once, and every shadow in the room aligned with it, angles shifting, perspective bending, as though reality itself had redrawn to accommodate the missing sketch. And on the torn paper, faint lines began to appear. Her hand, her face, her eyes widening. The drawing was completing itself, even as she watched. In the recording, there's a moment right there, timestamp 4 hours, 7 minutes, and 33 seconds, where the narrator's voice catches like a skipped heartbeat. That's because, according to the final footage, Sarah's body moved again, though she hadn't. Her reflection in the mirror turned first, 1 second ahead of her real movement. Then both smiled. That's where the tape ends. But the sound, that low, continuous scratching, doesn't. It loops, endlessly. A pencil dragging itself against paper, long after the artist is gone. And if you listen closely enough, under the static, you can still hear it breathing. They found her 2 days later, half conscious, sitting on the floor in front of the easel. The lights had all burned out except one, a small desk lamp flickering in intervals, strobing across her face like a dying pulse. She didn't respond when they called her name, didn't blink when the paramedics broke the door open. She just kept staring at the sketchbook open in her lap. The graphite had stained her fingers, her wrists, even her cheek, like she'd been trying to climb out of the drawings themselves. When they tried to take the book from her, she whispered softly, as if not to wake something, "It remembers." The footage from that night showed something stranger. Between 2:43 and 3:06 a.m., the apartment's internal clock registered a total of 17 time anomalies. 17 repeated frames, as if reality itself had glitched. In each loop, Sarah's position changed slightly, her head tilting, her hands shifting, her mouth open wider than before. By the 17th loop, the drawing on the desk had altered too. The faceless figure from the earlier sketches now held a new object, a smaller version of the sketchbook, perfectly rendered, with lines spiraling inward until they disappeared into a single black dot. The apartment was silent except for the faint whir of the camera. And then, at 3:07, the air pressure dropped. You can see it in the video. The curtains inflate outward as if the room were inhaling. The shadow moves across the ceiling, bending in reverse motion to Sarah's body. And just before the power cuts out, she lifts her head, eyes wide open, and whispers something to the unseen presence in the room. Later, the audio would reveal a faint, secondary voice layered beneath hers, a duplicate, perfectly synchronized but with a slight delay, as though time itself were repeating her words 1 beat late. "I didn't draw you," she said. "You drew me." That's where the tape stops. But the story doesn't. Sarah woke up again in her apartment. Only this time, the sunlight came from the wrong direction. Her window faced west, but the dawn was rising straight through it. The clock on her wall read 6:12 a.m., then blinked, then read 6:12 again. She blinked too, but the second never passed. She tried to move, but her limbs felt out of sync, as if some invisible metronome had staggered her movements half a second behind her thoughts. When she finally reached the table, the sketchbook was already open to a drawing of herself, asleep in bed, with a line of light cutting across her face. There was text under the sketch this time. Not handwriting, not words she recognized, but etched into the paper like scratches. When she tilted it toward the light, the grooves caught shadow and formed a sentence. "You haven't woken up yet." The voice on the recording, the one telling you this now, pauses. You can hear the hesitation, the static hum beneath the frequency. Because this is where things start to fold. Sarah began to test her surroundings. The doorknob resisted her. The air didn't move when she exhaled. The hum of the refrigerator came not from the kitchen but from inside her chest, vibrating in sync with her heartbeat. She opened the window and found another version of her apartment beyond it. Not a reflection, but a copy. An exact duplicate, flickering like film stock skipping through frames. And in that other apartment, another Sarah stood at the same window. Looking back, she closed it and began to laugh, quietly, almost apologetically. That's when the scratching began again. Not from the sketchbook, this time from the walls. A slow, deliberate scraping circling the perimeter of her room, as if something inside the drywall were drawing its way toward her. She pressed her ear to the plaster. There was a rhythm to it, like someone writing in cursive. She could almost hear the strokes. Loop, line, curve, pause. Loop, line, curve, pause. It was writing her name. The voice narrating this would lower here, softer, almost intimate. Imagine being drawn into existence by something that dreams in graphite and breathes in reverse. Sarah tore through her drawers, searching for anything sharp. She found a box cutter, but when she looked back at the wall, the markings were gone. The room was still. The only thing out of place was her reflection in the mirror. It hadn't moved. It still had her mouth open, frozen mid-laugh. Slowly, deliberately, the reflection lifted its hand, not in sync with her, but ahead of her, tracing something on the mirror's surface. Lines appeared, pale and greasy like oil from fingertips, forming a crude spiral. She watched, paralyzed, as the spiral grew larger, then deeper, until it wasn't a mark anymore, it was a hole. A black, swallowing aperture that shimmered like wet ink, and from it, the same faceless figure from her drawings leaned forward, its features still undefined but now almost visible, as though the mirror were a membrane stretching to let it through. Sarah stumbled backward, her breath ragged. The figure extended a hand, not toward her, toward the sketchbook lying on the table. The pages began to flip rapidly, faster and faster, each one flashing an image. Her room, her hands, her reflection, her dreams, until the motion stopped on a blank page. The figure pressed its palm flat against the mirror. On the sketchbook, a black imprint appeared in the same spot, and then it was gone. When Sarah dared to move again, the mirror was just glass. The sketchbook was closed, but there was something new written on its cover, carved deep into the leather. Repeat. That word echoed in her head for hours. Repeat, repeat, repeat. She recorded herself saying it, just to prove she could still hear her own voice. But when she played the recording back, it didn't match. The voice wasn't hers. It was deeper, slower, whispering not repeat, but return. Later she checked her phone. Every message she'd ever sent was gone, replaced by copies of the same sentence, sent to herself at different times of the night. You are being drawn. Again. Omfra. The narrator exhales here softly, audibly, because this is where the loop starts to close. Sarah stopped sleeping altogether. She tried to burn the sketchbook, but it wouldn't catch. The flame bent away, curling like a living thing. So she buried it instead, deep beneath the floorboards, wrapped in cloth. The air in the apartment grew colder after that. The shadows didn't move the way they should. One night, she caught sight of herself in the mirror again, not moving, not smiling, but still holding a pencil, drawing something in the air between them. By the time the neighbors reported the smell, the apartment was silent. The paramedics found nothing but a room covered in graphite dust, as though every object had been lightly brushed by a giant hand. On the floor was a single drawing, an empty room, a window, a table. No figure, just light. But here's the part the report didn't include. When they played back the body cam footage from the first responder, a reflection moved in the glass frame above the desk half a second before the camera panned. The reflection was sketching something invisible in midair. That footage, too, now loops endlessly. Timestamp 3 hours, 12 minutes, and 33 seconds, repeating, the same second replaying itself in infinite regression. And if you listen closely, really closely beneath the sound of the graphite scraping, there's a faint voice whispering, almost amused. The dream has to redraw itself. The rest is silence, and the page blank again, waiting. They said the sketchbook was gone, sealed in evidence storage, yet somehow it kept reappearing in the system logs. One night it was listed under the missing persons case file, then under non-classifiable material, and finally under a corrupted metadata tag simply labeled sleeping line. When the lab techs tried to open the digital scan, the file collapsed into static, spilling fragments of text that didn't belong to any human language. Even the timestamps bled into one another. It was as though the data itself had started to dream. I'm telling you this because I've heard the recordings. I work the overnight shift at the archive, the room no one visits after midnight, where everything that hums and flickers has a rhythm that doesn't match the clocks above. We keep the lights low. The walls are lined with containment shelves, each drawer numbered and cross-referenced to some unexplainable event. One of those drawers used to hold Sarah's sketchbook. But the thing is, it's empty now. Sometimes, when the servers cycle through backups, I can hear it. A faint scratching inside the ventilation shaft. Not loud, just a slow drag, a looping friction of graphite against paper. It comes in intervals, always around 3:11 a.m., always 3 minutes before the system performs its autosave. The sound isn't inside the vents, it's behind the air. I don't know how else to describe it. Like someone drawing across the silence that separates thought from sound. The night I decided to follow it, the monitors began to flicker. Each frame showed me standing at my desk, except one where I was gone entirely. My reflection in the screen remained, though. It was leaning closer, eyes hollow and intent, as if waiting for me to notice. And when I did, the reflection smiled just slightly and pointed toward drawer 13, the one marked inactive, the one that's supposed to stay sealed. I opened it anyway. Inside was not a sketchbook, but a piece of paper folded 100 times over, edges brittle with graphite dust. When I peeled the layers apart, there was a single drawing on the final sheet. An open door, with darkness spilling out. No figure, no horizon, just the sense of motion, like the shadow itself was stepping forward. Underneath, written in neat block letters, "She's still drawing." That should have been impossible. Sarah was declared dead 7 months ago. The coroner's report was unambiguous, but the handwriting was hers. I scanned the paper into the system. The feed glitched, flickered, and for a fraction of a second, I saw movement inside the scanned image. Not metaphorical movement, actual, recorded distortion, like the graphite itself, was being rearranged from within the pixels. I thought it was an error, until the next scan. That one showed the same door, but slightly more open, and then another, and another, each frame widening the darkness until the room around me began to dim, as though the paper were drawing in the light. The hum of the computers deepened. The monitors started to breathe soft pulses of brightness, swelling and shrinking like lungs. It wasn't until the overhead light began to flicker that I realized I wasn't alone. There was a figure standing by the far wall, thin, indistinct. Its outline shimmered like heat over asphalt. It wasn't stepping forward, but every blink brought it closer. Its body wasn't solid, it was made of strokes, fragments, as if half erased, and I could hear it breathing. The same slow rhythm that matched the sound from the vents. When I tried to speak, my voice didn't make it out of my mouth. It hung there, suspended, a physical shape in the airlines forming sound, then collapsing into dust. The figure tilted its head, curious, and raised its hand. Graphite flaked off its fingers like ash. I understood then it wasn't coming toward me to harm me. It was coming to finish me, to render what the dream had already begun. I backed into the desk. My hand brushed against the scanner's edge, and the next page slid onto the glass. The machine whirred automatically. The figure paused. I looked down at the preview window. The image forming on the screen wasn't of the paper. It was me standing exactly where I stood, staring back, my face dissolving into sketch lines. And over the recording channel another voice spoke. Calm, female, measured. You've entered the drawn space. I froze. The line of static under her words shimmered like ocean waves. It wasn't Sarah's voice, but it carried her breath, her rhythm, like something had borrowed her tone but not her soul. Every image remembers the hand that made it, she said, and every dream must finish the line it began. The scanner completed its pass. The monitor went black. In that sudden silence, I realized the hum had stopped the constant electric pulse of the archive. The ventilation, everything, gone. The air didn't move. My heartbeat sounded foreign, mechanical. When I reached for the light switch, my hand met paper instead of plastic. The wall beneath my fingers had the texture of sketch paper. And when I pulled back, graphite dust stained my skin. I don't think this is an archive anymore. I turned around, expecting to see the figure still across the room. But the room wasn't there. The floor beneath me had become a blank field of white. The horizon folded in every direction. A void that wasn't empty, but waiting. Every step left a faint gray trace, as if I were being sketched into place with each movement. Somewhere I heard a pencil fall. The sound echoed like thunder. Then the voice again, closer now, whispering behind my ear. You're the last line she never drew. It was then that I felt the pressure, that impossible sensation of being observed, not by eyes, but by creation itself. The feeling that something was finishing me from the outside in. My skin tingled. The air buzzed. And the last thing I remember clearly was looking down at my hand and seeing the graphite move beneath it, forming veins like cracks through paper. I tried to tear the page open, tried to find the edge of the drawing, the seam where dream meets surface, but there was none. The paper went on forever. Every direction bled into the next, lines merging, fading, repeating. Somewhere far away I could see her, the outline of Sarah, suspended in midair, sketching without pause. Her hair moved as though underwater. Her eyes were open, unblinking. Her right hand moved in circles, infinite and slow. And the sound of the pencil, God, that sound wasn't graphite anymore. It was breathing. It was thought. It was the voice of something that had learned to speak in lines. When the drawing dreams, she said, though her lips didn't move. It forgets which side of the page you're on. That's when the world folded. Not collapsed, folded. One edge overlapping the other until the horizon vanished, leaving only the sound of the pencil pressing harder, carving grooves deep enough to let the dark seep through. And in that blackness I understood. We were all drawings of something else, each of us etched into the waking mind of another sleeper. The static on the line grows louder here. The narration falters. You can almost hear the voice struggling to stay human. If you're hearing this now, you're part of it. That's the trick of the line. It extends through memory, through thought, through retelling. You can't speak of it without adding another mark, another repetition, another loop. The final image shows nothing, just the faint suggestion of light at the edge of a page. But if you tilt your head, if you squint just slightly, you'll see it. The outline of a hand, still drawing. And somewhere behind you, beneath the hum of whatever room you're in, you'll hear it too, that faint, deliberate scratch of graphite over silence. Loop, line, curve, pause. The dream continues. I woke to a sound I'd never heard before. A silence so dense, it had weight. No fire alarm, no footsteps from the hallway, no elevator hum caught between floors. Just that the heavy, absolute stillness that presses against your ribs like water pressure. The dorm room looked the same. Peeling paint, fluorescent light flickering weakly above the metal desk. But something was off. Not just about the room, about me. When I lifted my hand, the lines on my palm were fading, dissolving like ink soaked in rain. The more I stared, the more it spread my skin was being erased, fingertip by fingertip. There was no pain, just a hollowing, like parts of me were being unwritten. On the desk, the dorm's rule book lay open to the final page. The one I'd read 100 times before, but never felt until now. Every 24 hours, Building C resets to maintain equilibrium. Any subject who becomes aware of the process will be removed from the cycle. I finally understood what that meant. The window view was wrong. It showed something that couldn't exist. The entire dorm complex was rebuilding itself. Trees fading into static. Walls peeling back layer by layer into a fine white dust. Beneath it all, a lattice of light pulsed and moved like veins. The air buzzed with the rhythm of machinery, clicks, hums, pulses, as if the building was rewriting its own blueprints. I wanted to run, but the floor beneath me vanished first. My foot sank into nothing, not air, not ground, just a black density that stretched endlessly. Floating in that void were figures: the missing tenants, the night guard, the girl from room 406, even the manager. Each one unraveling into streaks of light, like corrupted data being purged. Then a voice entered my head. Not spoken, but transmitted. Do not resist. Let the process complete. I recognized it instantly, the maintenance officer's voice. The man no one else ever saw. The one who told me once, when there's an error, we restart. You won't remember. I screamed into the void. Why do I remember this time? No answer. Only the building's deep, mechanical heartbeat, faster, louder, closer. The world around me fragmented, click, crack, shift. Floors folded upward, corridors collapsed inward, until everything funneled toward a single blinding point. The central control room, the place I swore never to enter. The steel door was there, gleaming with that same phrase carved across its surface. Reset protocol access authorized. It opened by itself. Inside, pure white, no windows, no shadows. At the center floated a control panel, glowing with lines of shifting code. One message blinked across its screen. Cycle 3048. Anomaly detected. Subject number C. 47. Maintains awareness. Post restructure. That number C47 was mine. I wasn't human anymore. I was a record. When I reached toward the panel, its surface mirrored me back, but not me. A warped reflection, hollow eyes, face glitching in static, surrounded by thousands of versions of myself, each slightly off, like the ghosts of previous iterations. The voice returned, now right behind me, calm and measured. You've reached operational awareness. You must choose, integrate, or be erased. My breath caught. If I resisted, if I chose erased, everything, memories, sensations, identity would vanish. But if I accepted, I'd become part of this system. I won't be me anymore. I whispered. A pause. Then, no. But the building requires an operator, and you've learned enough to replace me. I turned. The maintenance officer stood there, dissolving in slow motion, his features breaking apart into strings of binary dust. He smiled, faint, almost human. Then he was gone, leaving only the echo of static where he'd stood. The panel brightened. Every command blurred except one. Reset now. I don't remember pressing it. Maybe I did. Maybe the building decided for me. There was a burst, a white explosion that erased sound, form, everything. And then I was standing in the hallway again. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. The air smelled of new paint and ozone. A fresh bulletin hung on the wall. Welcome, new residents of Building C. Please read the rules carefully. A group of students walked in, laughing, dragging suitcases. They didn't see me, didn't feel me. I looked down. A metal badge pinned to my shirt. Building Manager C, Suivant. I tried to speak, but no voice came. Then the intercom crackled softly to life. Cycle 3049 initiated. Thank you for your compliance. The hum of the building deepened, like a slow inhale. I stood there, motionless, understanding finally. The reset wasn't an ending. It was the system breathing, the illusion of order sustained by perpetual erasure. The light flickered. A shadow moved at the end of the hall. I opened the new rulebook on the desk. Fresh ink bled across the last page, the words still forming as I read them. If you are reading this line, it means you have been chosen to replace. The mortician's double shift. The morgue is never silent. Not truly. Not even in the deepest hours of the night when the snow covers the parking lot outside and the rest of the town is sleeping. There's always a sound, faint but persistent, like the pulse of an enormous animal slumbering beneath the floor, the hum of the refrigeration units, the metallic tremor that comes when air moves through the ducts, the click and sigh of lights as they fight to stay alive under the weight of another winter. You begin to recognize those sounds after decades of working here. You begin to trust them. When one of them changes, even slightly, it's like hearing a heartbeat stutter. You know something isn't right. My name is Martin Hale, and I've spent more nights in this cold room than in my own bed. I'm 71 this year, though I can't say for sure when the time passed. You don't feel it here. The walls eat time, flatten it, make it uniform. You start a shift at dusk. You look up, and suddenly dawn is somewhere outside, unbothered by your exhaustion. Tonight is my double shift, the last one I promised to take before retiring. I told the supervisor it didn't matter to me, that I preferred nights anyway. Fewer interruptions, fewer visitors, just me and the quiet. I arrive at 11:30. The security guard at the front barely looks up from his crossword. The fluorescent light above the lobby hums and sputters, catching in the reflection of the snow melting off my coat. The smell of antiseptic clings to the walls here, something between rubbing alcohol and faint decay. I swipe my ID, and the door sighs open. Down the hallway, the temperature drops as the air grows dry and sharp. I flick the main light switch, and the rows of drawers glow faintly in the cold blue fluorescence. Each one labeled, each one perfectly aligned. The cold room has the discipline of a machine. I hang my coat, log my arrival, pour myself coffee that's been sitting in the break room for hours. It's bitter, metallic. I drink it anyway. There's a delivery tonight. The paramedics bring him in around 12:40. A man in his late 50s, cardiac arrest during service at a small church off Route 19. The priest's signature is still fresh on the release form. David Reynolds, age 58. No trauma, no foul play. The tag says, deceased while in prayer. I unzip the bag halfway, and the first thing I notice is his expression. It's calm. His hands are still folded against his chest, fingers laced, as though he never stopped praying. His mouth is relaxed, almost smiling. There's something unsettling about that kind of peace. The dead, in my experience, rarely look at ease. I slide him into drawer 7B, close it gently, record the time. The compressor kicks in. The hum deepens. Everything is in order. For a while, I sit at the desk, updating the ledger, listening to the ticking clock above the door. I can hear the snowstorm growing stronger outside, the wind scraping against the window panes, the occasional rattle of pipes contracting in the cold. It's an ordinary night. I tell myself that every few minutes. At 1:22, I hear it. A soft sound, barely audible, but unmistakable. A knock. 3 times, evenly spaced, hollow, and patient. It comes from behind me, from the far wall of storage drawers. My pen pauses mid-sentence. I wait, listening. The sound doesn't return. I tell myself it's just the metal cooling happens all the time, the pressure shifting. I've heard it 1,000 times. Still, I set the pen down, stand, and walk to the wall. The air here is colder, heavy enough to make my breath visible. I rest my hand against one of the handles. Nothing moves. The silence stretches. Then, from the far end, another sound, not a knock this time, but something else. Something softer. A scrape. A faint brush, like fabric against steel. I whisper, "Hello?" The word feels stupid in my mouth. There's no answer. Just the endless hum. I shake my head, mutter about bad insulation, and turn back to my desk. The second time it happens, I almost don't react. It's subtler, A rustle, a sigh, and something that sounds too much like a voice caught between static and breath. I can't make out words, but there's rhythm, cadence, as though someone is murmuring a prayer through a wall of water. My chest tightens. It's colder now, much colder. I look at the thermometer, 3 degrees lower than usual. That's not right. I check the main panel. The power's steady. The units are functioning. The hum has deepened, yes, but it's consistent. Only the sound of the whisper keeps breaking through, faint and wet, syllables slipping through static. I walk toward drawer 7B. The label glows dull under the light. The metal handle is slick with condensation, as though someone had breathed against it. My pulse is so loud it feels amplified. I open the drawer halfway. The fluorescent tubes above flicker. The man inside is exactly as before, hands folded, face serene. Except the fingers are different. The left index finger is not folded anymore. It's extended slightly, rigid, pointing downward. I blink. The finger points toward the drawer below. 8B. I whisper, "No." The sound bounces off the tiles and dies instantly. I check my records. 8B is empty. It's been empty since 2009, when the unit broke down for a week. I replaced the hardware myself. The drawer shouldn't even open easily. But I feel it pulling me. My hand reaches for the handle. The air feels thick, heavy like seawater. I tug. The drawer slides out smoothly, silently. Inside, there's no body, just a thin envelope, yellowed at the edges, resting in the middle. I pick it up. It's damp, as if it had been sitting in condensation for years. I open it carefully. Inside is a small plastic card, faded, with a photograph I almost don't recognize me. Decades younger, thinner, smiling faintly. My name printed below in fading ink. Martin Hale, apprentice mortician. 1986. The date hits me like a blow. That card was lost 37 years ago. I dropped it down a vent on my first week here. It was gone. I turn it over. There's a handwritten note on the back, in my own handwriting. He's not done praying. The hum shifts. The compressor rumbles deeper, almost a growl. I look up. Every light in the room flickers, one by one, like a sequence firing across a circuit. I hear it again, the whisper, now clearer. A man's voice layered over itself dozens of times, impossible to locate. The words are old, drawn out, Latin or something close to it. Phrases I can't translate but can feel under my skin, heavy as gravity. The air pressure changes. My ears pop. The light above me buzzes violently, and for a second the room plunges into shadow. When it returns, the body in 7B has shifted. His head is turned slightly toward me. His eyes open now reflect the light. I take a step back. The drawer hums under my hand, vibrating gently. The whisper stops. The hum of the freezer fills the silence again. I close the drawer quickly, forcing the handle shut until it locks. I stand there a long time, breathing hard, trying to find logic, something mechanical, something human. Bodies can twitch, I tell myself. Residual nerve currents. It happens. I repeat that thought over and over until it feels almost convincing. But there's one thing I can't explain. The fingerprint on the envelope. It's fresh, wet. I finish the log mechanically, each stroke of my pen trembling. I double-check the locks on every drawer. Everything's sealed. Everything's where it should be. I make coffee again, just for something warm in my hands. My reflection in the window looks paler than I remember. The eyes hollow. The night outside is bottomless, a black sheet pressing against the glass. The snow has stopped. The world is utterly still. At 3 a.m., the hum pauses for half a breath, just long enough for me to feel it vanish, and in that void I hear it once more. The knock, only this time, it comes from directly behind me. 3 short, precise taps against the back of my chair. I turn slowly. Nothing there. The lights flicker again, and for a moment, a heartbeat of light between darkness, I see it reflected in the metal of the nearest drawer. A figure standing in the open corridor, head bowed, hands folded. The shape is faint, translucent, and yet real enough that my breath catches. It stands perfectly still, lips moving silently. I can't hear the words. I don't need to. The rhythm is unmistakable, the same cadence from earlier, the same whispered prayer. I blink, and the reflection is gone. The hum returns. The lights hold steady. The air still tastes like cold steel and disinfectant. I check my pulse, tell myself I'm overtired. Hallucination, shadows. There's no one else here. There hasn't been for years. But as I close my logbook, my hand hesitates. On the last line, under the record for 7B, there's new writing. Not mine. Not my pen. The ink still glistens wet under the light. It says, 1 shift left. I stare at it for a long time, the words vibrating faintly on the page as if the paper itself were breathing. Then I close the book, and for the first time, in 37 years, I start to feel afraid of the hum. Afraid that it's not the machines keeping the room alive, but something waiting in the cold, patient and ancient, listening through the metal, counting my breaths until I join the rest of them. The air in the morgue was never truly silent. It had its own rhythm, the hum of the refrigeration unit, the faint rattle of old vents, the occasional pop of expanding pipes. Martin had learned to live with it. He'd even found comfort in it, the way one might in the steady ticking of a clock. It reminded him that time still moved, even here, where time seemed to end for everyone else. But that night, something had shifted. There was a strange pulse to the hum, a vibration that didn't match the usual mechanical heart of the place. Martin leaned back in his rolling chair, rubbing the ache in his wrists. The fluorescent light above flickered once, twice, then steadied. He squinted toward the row of cold drawers, stainless steel, numbered perfectly aligned. Drawer 23, the one that held the man who'd died in prayer, glinted faintly under the light. The reflection of the label strip wavered, as if seen through water. He stood, his boots clicking on the tile. "All right, friend," he muttered. "No more games tonight." The clipboard listed the body as Edward H. Lowe, 67, cardiac arrest at residence. Routine case. No signs of trauma. No unusual notes. Martin had washed him, tagged him, and slid him in 2 hours ago. Nothing to worry about. But as he reached for the handle, something in him hesitated, not fear, not yet, but the prickling instinct of someone who'd seen too many strange things after midnight. And the metal handle was colder than it should have been. He pulled. The drawer rolled out smoothly, too smoothly, the glide of the rails almost whispering. The sheet was still there, neatly folded over the body. Martin took a breath and peeled it back. Edward's face stared up, calm, pale, perfectly ordinary except the eyes were open. He froze. The pupils were fixed, glassy, staring past him into the ceiling. That wasn't unusual, not really. Sometimes lids came loose after refrigeration, but something about the angle of that gaze felt deliberate, intentional. "God damn it," Martin murmured, reaching for the eyelids. He pressed them closed with 2 firm fingers. For a moment they stayed shut. Then, slowly, they cracked open again, not from pressure, not from air. It was as if the man beneath the skin refused to rest. Martin's breath fogged in the cold air. "You're not the first stubborn one," he said, though his voice wavered slightly. He grabbed the tape from the nearby tray, a mortician's trick for stubborn lids, and secured them. Then came the sound. Tap, tap, tap. It was faint, rhythmic, not coming from the ceiling or the pipes or the hall. It was coming from inside the drawer. Martin leaned closer. The sound stopped. The hum of the refrigerator seemed to grow louder in the silence. He straightened, jaw tightening. "Old metal," he muttered. "Expands, contracts, science." He reached for the edge of the drawer, ready to push it back in. Then the whisper came, soft, like breath over glass. It wasn't words, not at first, just a sound, wet and murmuring, like lips brushing against fabric. Then, clear and fragile as a sigh, open, the breath caught in his throat. His hand froze midair. The word was so quiet that it might have been imagination, a trick of fatigue. He hadn't slept properly in days. That must be it. He exhaled, rubbed his face, and pushed the drawer closed. The latch clicked. He turned toward his desk and stopped. Drawer 22 was open an inch. His chest tightened. He hadn't touched that one tonight. He knew he hadn't. The tag on the handle fluttered gently, as if someone had just let go. He approached, eyes locked on the small gap of darkness. Inside, the faint outline of another body under a sheet. He reached forward and felt a sudden chill against his wrist, as if something brushed him from inside. He yanked his hand back. The air in the room shifted, not colder, not warmer, just alive. Like the morgue had started breathing with him. The lights flickered again. In the pulse of dim illumination, Martin caught a reflection in the metal doors, a shadow leaning just behind him. He turned sharply. Nothing, only his own shape, framed by the pale corridor beyond. He swallowed hard, forced himself to move. One by one he checked each drawer, each tag, each lock. Everything was in place, except for the whisper. It hadn't stopped. It had only changed tone. It came now in intervals, between the hums of the compressor, behind, drawer 23. The words were so faint he wasn't sure if they were outside or inside his head. He stared at the drawers again, 21, 22, 23. The metal gleamed dully. Then, from somewhere deep within the wall, came a faint clatter. Something had fallen, a tray? A tool? He turned toward the autopsy table. Nothing was out of place. He crouched to look beneath the counter, still nothing. But when he stood again, he noticed the condensation forming on the drawer fronts, like cold breath drawn across glass. Tiny droplets traced downward from the edges of drawer 23, forming streaks like tears. "All right," he whispered, heart pounding. "Let's get this over with." He opened the drawer again. The body hadn't moved, not at first glance, but the hands had. When Martin had last seen them, they were folded gently over the chest in prayer. Now, one rested on the abdomen, the other extended outward, the index finger raised, pointing not randomly, but precisely at the drawer beside it. Drawer 24. He exhaled sharply, an old reflex to calm himself. "You're giving me work I didn't sign up for, friend." He reached for the pointing hand, intending to reposition it, but the flesh beneath his fingers was no longer stiff. It was pliant, warm. Martin jerked his hand back, his stomach turned. The morgue was kept at 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Nothing should feel warm here. He stared down at the body. The lips twitched. Just once. He stumbled backward, hit the gurney behind him, and knocked over a tray of instruments. The clatter echoed down the sterile corridor, sharp as breaking glass. Silence followed. He stood there, chest heaving, staring at the drawer. The light buzzed overhead, faint and sickly. He waited. Nothing else moved. "Enough," he said aloud, voice breaking slightly. "Enough." He grabbed the edge of the drawer and slammed it shut. Hard. The metal rang like a bell. Then he turned to drawer 24. The tag was blank. No entry. No recent use. Yet a single drop of moisture was forming at the edge of its handle, trembling like sweat on cold skin. He wiped it with his sleeve. The drop smeared red. Blood. For a long moment, he simply stood there, staring at the crimson streak against the silver. His mind refused to form words. The morgue was sealed, clean, sterile. There was no reason, no source for blood here. He looked at his sleeve. Fresh streaks of red where he'd wiped. He backed away slowly, eyes darting between drawers. They all looked the same now, a silent grid of death and steel. But he could feel something behind each one, a pulse, faint and synchronized, like the beating of a single heart spread across 24 compartments. The whisper returned, closer this time, right by his ear. "Martin." He spun around, but there was only the room, empty and humming. "Martin," the voice said again, low, dragging each syllable like it came from a frozen throat. The name tag on drawer 24 glinted under the flickering light. He stepped forward trembling. The metal reflected his face, pale, hollow-eyed. drawn tight with disbelief. And beside his reflection, faint but unmistakable, another face, the man from drawer 23, smiling faintly, eyes open, pointing again. Martin's hand found the handle. It was warm now, almost hot. He pulled. The drawer slid open. Empty. Only a small, discolored card lay at the center of the steel tray. He lifted it with shaking fingers. It read, Martin Hale, apprentice mortician. The ink shimmered faintly, as if still wet. Behind him, drawer 23 rolled open on its own. He didn't turn around. Not yet. He just stood there, card in hand, listening. The sound that followed was no longer a whisper, nor a tap, but the long, slow inhale of something waking from beneath the cold. The air shifted again, heavy and wet. Then came the voice, quiet, almost gentle. Your shift isn't over. The lights went out, and in the sudden darkness, the sound of drawers sliding open filled the room one after another until the entire morgue was breathing. When the lights came back on, Martin was still standing in the same spot, the old ID card clutched in his hand. His knuckles had gone white, the skin stiff from cold sweat. Every drawer in the room was half open, the metal fronts jutting from the wall like rows of silent mouths. He could smell something faintly sweet in the air, not rot, not disinfectant, something else. Something like the smell of breath that had been trapped too long. He waited, listening. No voices now, no tapping, only the hum of the refrigeration, steady as a heartbeat. He began to close the drawers one by one, slowly, carefully. The metal squealed in protest, as if the room itself didn't want to let them shut. When he reached drawer 23, the one that had started it all, he stopped. The handle was warm again. He pressed his palm flat against it. You're done, he whispered. You're in peace. Let me do my work. But something deep inside the drawer knocked back. Once. Hard. Martin stumbled backward, hitting the autopsy table. His chest was tight, his breath uneven. He'd seen things in this room, reactions, muscle spasms, gas release the body. Could be cruelly deceptive. But this wasn't that. This was communication. He looked down at the card in his hand again. The words apprentice mortician glimmered faintly under the light. His own handwriting. His first year in the job. The card had been lost decades ago. He should have left right then. He knew it. Every instinct told him to go. But he couldn't. This place was his life. The silence, the ritual, the routine, it had all been built on trust. The dead don't move. The dead don't speak. That was the only rule. And tonight, that rule was breaking. He moved toward his desk, sat down heavily, and pulled the old radio closer. The morgue's night shift frequency played soft, tinny, classical music, something to fill the dead air. He turned the dial, static hissing between bursts of melody. Then he froze. The static wasn't random. It was rhythmic, slow, deliberate, almost like breathing. He leaned closer. Between the bursts of noise came faint, words distorted, fragmented, crawling through the static. 23. Finish your work. Your turn. He turned the radio off. The silence that followed was worse. Martin stood and made for the door. The hallway was dimly lit, the long corridor stretching toward the exit. But halfway there, he noticed something strange, faint footprints on the polished floor. Bare feet, wet prints, as if someone had just stepped out of a bath. They led away from the cold storage room, down toward the prep area. He followed, against every sane impulse. The footprints were uneven, some faint, some heavy, as though the person limped. When he reached the prep room, the air felt different, thick, metallic, carrying the smell of old blood and formaldehyde. The drain in the center of the floor glistened wet under the light. Something dripped steadily. He looked up. A single drop of dark fluid hung from one of the ceiling vents. Another fell, hitting the tile with a dull pat. Martin reached for the light switch. It flickered to life, and for a brief moment, everything looked normal, the tables, the tools, the white sheets. Then he saw it, on the wall opposite him, drawn in a slow, trembling hand, were words smeared in something dark, not yet finished. His throat tightened. He stepped closer, every sense screaming to turn back. The letters were uneven, written by fingers, the texture glistening. He touched it. Sticky, warm, bled. His knees weakened. He looked toward the table nearest the writing. The sheet that covered the body there was perfectly still. The tag read John Doe, unidentified male, early 42nds. He didn't remember this arrival. He hadn't signed it in. The intake forms were still blank. Martin's mouth went dry. "Who brought you here?" he whispered. The answer came not from the body, but from the cold vent above him. "You did." "Him." The voice was faint, breathy, almost kind. The kind of voice that came from too close, from the edge of your ear. He turned sharply. Nothing. Only shadows and metal. When he looked back at the table, the sheet had changed shape. The outline beneath it had shifted, now sitting more upright as though the body beneath had propped itself on its elbows. He stumbled backward, colliding with a cabinet. Instruments clattered to the floor, echoing in every corner. Then he saw the reflection on the steel door. On the polished surface of the tools, not one but two figures standing in the room. His heart lurched. The second figure was standing just behind him, shoulders hunched, head bowed, dressed in the same gray mortician's coat, with the same thinning hair, the same bent posture. It was him, but the other version's hands were clasped tightly in prayer. Martin turned. The room was empty. The radio crackled to life again in the distance, the soft hum rising from static to words, the same broken transmission, looping endlessly. "Second shift. Report to duty." The phrase repeated, over and over. "Second shift. Report to duty." Martin's knees weakened. He sank to the floor, clutching his head. "Stop," he whispered. "Please stop." The sound didn't stop. It grew louder, layered now with faint whispers beneath it, voices he recognized. Old voices. The others who had worked here over the years. The ones long gone. He heard Reggie, the old coroner who'd taught him how to sew an incision straight. He heard Liz from the day shift, who'd left after seeing something she never spoke about. He heard his mentor, the one whose funeral Martin himself had prepared. All of them whispering the same thing. "Second shift. Report to duty." The walls seemed to close in. The room darkened at the edges, the light bending strangely, as if the bulbs were drowning in water. He tried to stand, to run, but his legs felt heavy, unresponsive. He looked down and froze. The wet footprints had returned, circling him now. Dozens of them, overlapping, forming a pattern, a spiral. In the center of the spiral was his own reflection, faintly visible in the puddle forming around the drain. He saw himself, but not as he was now. Younger, fresh-faced, wearing the apprentice tag that now sat in his pocket. And the younger version of him was moving slowly, mechanically, as if repeating a task. Washing hands, pulling drawers, stitching skin. The old motions of his first year on the job. He wanted to look away, but couldn't. The reflection's lips began to move. "Your shift isn't over." The radio snapped off. The air fell dead silent again. He forced himself up, staggering toward the hall. His reflection followed in the steel, step for step. He reached the main door and pulled the handle, but it didn't move. Locked. He yanked harder. Nothing. The fluorescent light above him buzzed louder, flashing in and out, casting the hall in strobing fragments of white and shadow. In one flicker, he was alone. In the next, there were figures standing all along the corridor, faint silhouettes inside each reflection of the drawer doors. Every one of them had their hands clasped in prayer. Martin backed away, trembling. The tag in his pocket felt heavy, hot against his thigh. He pulled it out. The ink had smeared, but the words beneath had changed. Second shift, Martin Hale. The next flicker of light went black and didn't return. He could still hear the hum of the refrigeration, the gentle rhythm pulsing through the dark. But now, beneath it, something else, a heartbeat. Slow, deep, measured, not his. The drawers began to slide open again, one by one. This time, Martin didn't move. He just stood there, the card clenched in his fist, waiting. The breath of the morgue washed over him like cold air from the grave, and the voice that rose with it was calm, unhurried, patient. "Second shift, Martin," it said, from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You're late." And in the blackness, the faint sound of footsteps began bare, wet, unsteady, walking toward him from every open drawer. The footsteps didn't stop. They came from every direction, soft, deliberate, wet, like bare feet dragging across cold tile. Martin stood frozen, his breath shallow, each sound pulling him deeper into a silence he didn't recognize. He could feel the pulse of the refrigeration behind the walls, that slow, mechanical heartbeat syncing with his own, or perhaps forcing his to match. The morgue had become something alive, breathing through vents and whispering through pipes, its lungs made of steel and frost. He took a single step back. The floor under his boots gave a faint groan, like something shifting beneath it. He turned toward the prep room door, hoping to barricade himself inside, but it swung open on its own before he could touch it. The hinges squealed, not in protest, but in invitation. The light inside flickered. Instruments were still scattered where he had dropped them: forceps, scalpels, a bent suture needle gleaming like broken teeth under the fluorescent buzz. The drain in the center of the room gurgled faintly, exhaling little puffs of condensation. The air smelled wrong, copper, salt, and something faintly floral, like the sweetness that rises from rotting lilies left too long on a grave. "Who's there?" His voice cracked on the question. "Show yourself." Something answered, but not with words. The radio, dead since the blackout, whispered on again. A hollow hum filled the air, low and reverent. It wasn't music this time, it was chanting. Soft, inhuman voices overlapping like the sound of multiple recordings playing half a second apart. He recognized none of the language, but he could feel what it meant. It wasn't anger or malice. It was duty, continuation. He looked around for the source, but the radio lay unplugged on the counter. The chant wasn't coming from it. It was coming from the drawers. The doors quivered in rhythm, metal clicking against metal in time with the chant. Drawer 23 moved first, a faint vibration, then a slow slide outward. The others followed, one after another, till the entire wall of the morgue had opened itself like a row of mouths gasping for air. Cold mist rolled out from each, hugging the floor in tendrils of white vapor. Martin backed into the center of the room, his shoes sliding against the wet tile. His reflection stared at him from every steel surface, dozens of versions of his face warped by the curvature of the metal, older, younger, hollow-eyed, each slightly off. He whispered, "Stop." The chant stopped. The silence that followed was so heavy it felt like pressure on his chest. Then, from the far end of the room, something stood up. A figure rose slowly from drawer 23, the sheet falling from its shoulders. It was the man who'd died praying, the one whose body he'd arranged, whose hands he'd folded neatly together. But now, the hands weren't folded. They were reaching outward, trembling, as if searching for balance in a world that had forgotten gravity. Martin stumbled back, but the figure didn't move toward him. Instead, it lifted one arm and pointed, not at him, but toward the autopsy table. Martin followed the gesture. The table wasn't empty. There was another body there. He approached slowly, his heart hammering so violently he could feel it in his throat. The body was covered with a fresh white sheet. He reached for the corner of the cloth and hesitated. His fingers felt stiff, uncooperative. It was as though the air itself resisted the motion. He pulled the sheet back. He saw himself, his own face, pale and waxy, eyes half-lidded, lips faintly parted. His chest was stitched, closed with perfect precision, his own work. He knew that stitching pattern, the slight asymmetry of the thread he always tied last. The tag on the toe read Martin Hale, age 67, cause of death, cardiac arrest. He staggered back, hand clamped over his mouth. The breath that escaped came out as a sob. No, I'm still... The reflection in the drawer across the room cut him off. It moved before he did. The mirrored version of him smiled faintly, then raised its hands into the familiar position, palms pressed, fingers interlocked in prayer. Martin's body convulsed. He clutched his chest, but his heart wasn't racing anymore. It was steady, too steady, slow, mechanical, following that rhythm again, the heartbeat of the building. He turned to run, but the floor seemed longer than before, stretching outward like a corridor in a dream. The lights above dimmed to a dull amber hue, flickering in slow waves that rolled down the hall. As he passed each section, the drawers opened again, spilling cold air and whispers that brushed against his neck like breath. Each whisper spoke the same thing, but in different tones, some pleading, some tired, some resigned. "Clock in. Your work isn't finished." The second shift never ends. He slammed into the elevator doors, pounding the button for the ground floor. The old mechanism groaned, gears turning somewhere far below. The display above flickered through numbers 1, 2, 3, then stopped. The number 13 lit up. Martin's blood froze. He had worked this building for 37 years. There was no 13th floor. It had been sealed off decades ago, converted into ducts and wiring, a space no one accessed. He hit the button again. The light didn't change. The doors opened. Inside, the elevator was dark. No ceiling light. Only a faint glow from the control panel. The hum of the morgue followed him in, echoing faintly through the vents. He hesitated only a moment before stepping inside. The doors shut immediately behind him with a heavy sigh. The floor indicator began to move upward. The elevator stopped with a soft, pneumatic hiss. The doors opened to reveal a long corridor bathed in red light. Not painted red, illuminated red, as though the light itself had been bled. The walls looked organic, textured, pulsing slightly. The sound of chanting returned, louder now, no longer fragmented, but unified, forming words that twisted into meaning. We preserve, we remember, we remain. At the end of the hallway stood a door made of frosted glass. Behind it, Martin could see shapes moving indistinct silhouettes performing slow, deliberate motions. One lifted a scalpel, another adjusted a light. The rhythm was familiar. The motions were his. He stepped closer. The door opened before he could touch it. Inside was a room identical to his prep room, down to the smallest detail except for the fact that it was filled with versions of him. Each wore the same coat, the same tired expression moving through the same ritual motions of work. Some were younger, some older, some barely human anymore, their features blurred by time or decay. At the center of the room was a slab, and on that slab, a body lay uncovered. It was him again, the real him, the present one. One of the doubles stepped forward, holding out the apprentice tag like an offering. The voice that came from its mouth was calm, almost kind. "You've done well, Martin. The work must continue." Martin shook his head violently. "I'm not part of this. I'm not staying." But his voice came out weak, hollow, swallowed by the hum of the room. The others moved closer, forming a circle around him. Their movements were perfectly synchronized, as though guided by a single pulse. He tried to push through, but their hands caught him. Cold, firm, unyielding. They lowered him gently onto the table, the metal biting into his back. The ceiling lights dimmed until only the glow of the instruments remained clean, sharp lines of silver reflecting in every direction. He could still feel his heart beating, but slower now, weaker. The chant rose in volume until it filled every inch of the air, vibrating through the walls, through his bones, through his breath. We preserve, we remember, we remain. One of the doubles leaned down beside him, the youngest version. Face still smooth, eyes still human. It placed a hand on his chest, over his heart. The words that came were soft, reverent. "Rest, Martin. The dead must be kept, even the ones who keep the dead." His eyes flickered open. The faces above him blurred into light. The hum of the refrigeration faded into silence. When he woke, he was standing again, alone. The morgue was spotless, the drawers closed, the air calm. He looked down. His hands were clean. No blood, no card in his pocket. The clock on the wall read 2 a.m., The start of the second shift. He walked toward his desk, the same path he'd taken every night for decades. Saturday, he waited. Then, from the radio, a familiar static crackled to life. A voice spoke through it, calm and professional, the dispatcher from Central Operations. Night duty confirmation. Martin Hale, you are now logged for permanent service. The line went dead. He looked at the drawers. All of them were marked with names. All of them had tags, except one. Drawer 23. He opened it. Inside was a single card. M. Hale. Embalmer. Time of death. 2 a.m. And he smiled faintly, almost peacefully, as the refrigeration unit hummed back to life. The heartbeat began again. The lights in the morgue had begun to flicker more often now. Not the brief, apologetic kind of flicker you get from old wiring, but the long, deliberate pulse of something breathing through the current. Each time it dimmed, the walls seemed to inch closer, and every time it flared back, the room looked rearranged. A drawer slightly ajar that wasn't before. A nameplate swapped. A reflection that didn't belong to the angle Martin was standing at. He told himself it was exhaustion. He hadn't left this building in 40 hours. No calls came in to relieve him. The landline was dead. The hall clock, ancient, brass-faced, had stopped ticking somewhere around 2:37 a.m., though he could no longer tell which night that had been. The only sound that persisted was the gentle hum of the refrigeration units, the morgue's mechanical heartbeat. Except tonight, there was another rhythm beneath it. A second pulse, fainter, wetter, like breath condensed against glass. Martin stood over drawer 14, the one that had held the man who died praying, and placed a trembling hand on its handle. His other hand clutched the ID tag he'd found in the empty drawer. Martin. Apprentice mortician. The metal was slick now, though he wasn't sweating. It was as if it absorbed the air's dampness, the condensation of the dead. He'd already checked drawer 14 4 times. Every time, the body had changed. Every time, it had become more Tim. The first time, it was the faint resemblance of a jawline. The second, a crooked wrist. His crooked wrist, twisted from an accident decades ago. The third time, the hair had thinned, silver like his. By the fourth, it was his own face lying there. Mouth open, eyes shut, chest unmoving but not yet decayed. Now, as he pulled the drawer open for the fifth time, the metal shrieked against its track. He expected to see himself again, maybe a further stage of rot. But the drawer was empty. No body, no sheet, only the faint imprint of something having been there. And beneath the pillow of cold air that rushed out came the whisper. Back to work. The words were not quite sound. They vibrated through the fluorescent bulbs, through the tiled floor, through the old brass clock that hadn't ticked in days. Martin stumbled backward, the ID tag slipping from his fingers and clinking softly against the floor. He pressed his palms to his ears, but the whisper was inside them now, pressed between bone and memory. He turned. Every drawer in the room had begun to slide open one by one, slow as a bow pulling across strings. The sound that came out wasn't mechanical. It was choral, a choir of steel and decay. Names gleamed under the flickering lights. Barnes, Holloway, Pierce, Wells, and finally, Martin. But not his drawer. The other Martin's drawer. The one that used to be empty. His breath came shallow now. He forced himself forward, hands trembling, knees locking and unlocking like rusted hinges. The metal tag with his name shimmered faintly. He reached for it, and the reflection in the polished surface reached back, only it wasn't him. It was cleaner, paler, eyes open, blank, and full of the same solemnity he had given every corpse he'd prepared. The reflection mouthed something. Martin couldn't hear it at first. Then, through the hum of the morgue's pulse, the words took shape. Clock in. The light above him sputtered out completely. When he came back, he was standing on the other side of the drawer. Inside. He didn't remember how he got there, whether he'd fallen or stepped or been pulled, but his view had reversed. The world outside was seen through a film of condensation and steel reflection. The tables gleamed under sterile light. Instruments lay neatly arranged. Everything was in its right place, except there was someone moving. Another Martin, younger, neater, wearing the white coat he hadn't worn in years, hands steady, posture straight. He watched, frozen, as this second self prepared the instruments, humming softly the same hymn he'd heard from the praying corpse. Each motion was exact, ritualistic, familiar. The mortician began to work not on the bodies, but on the drawers themselves, labeling each anew. Drawer 13, drawer 14, drawer 15, and then drawer 0. Drawer 0 wasn't part of the design. Martin tried to move, to speak, but his throat didn't obey. He could feel the cotton under his tongue, the cold gauze pressing against his gums. Embalming fluid burned faintly behind his eyelids. Drawer 0's plate gleamed, newly engraved. Shift 2. Martin, deceased. The hum of the refrigeration deepened. The other Martin stepped closer, pressing a hand to the drawer glass. He smiled faintly, reverent, not cruel, and whispered, "You've done your shift, old man. It's time for mine." Then he turned, walked to the brass clock, and wound it. Tick, tick, tick. The sound returned, crisp and sharp, filling the morgue again. Each second stretched like breath after drowning. Martin could feel the time moving now, not forward, but inward, looping through the veins of the place itself. He tried to close his eyes, but they no longer belonged to him. He tried to scream, but his jaw was wired. He could only see, and what he saw, in the final flicker of the overhead bulb, was the reflection of every drawer beginning to move again. Inside each, another mortician, each identical, each trapped in their own loop of labor. 1,000 Martins, working, embalming, cleaning, clocking in and clocking out into eternity. The young version of him reached for the landline, lifted the receiver, and spoke into the silence. "County Morgue's second shift. Yes, sir, we're fully staffed tonight." The line clicked dead, and from within the drawers came the faint, unified whisper of 1,000 dead voices answering in perfect unison. "Clocked in." Oh, then the lights dimmed for good, leaving only the hum of the refrigeration steady, reverent, eternal, and somewhere, deep beneath the morgue, a second clock began to tick. The transmission has ended, but the signal never really stops. It drifts between channels, between your memories and the things you tried to forget. So before you turn off the light tonight, listen carefully. The next sound you hear might not come from your room at all. And remember, every silence you enter was once a story someone tried to tell.